Letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics sitting in the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. On the way at 4 o'clock, I'll be joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also bad picture. Why do they do that? We need to change that. And political commentator Peter Edwards. And in a few moments, I'll be mucking the week with comedian Lewis Shaffer. But before all that, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. Good afternoon. Here's your latest headlines from the GB newsroom at 3 o'clock. World leaders have welcomed Ukraine's president to the G7 summit in Japan.
Good to see you. How are you? Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Bye, guys.
Volodymyr Zelensky met with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who reiterated the UK's ongoing support for the country in its fight against Russia. He also met with French President Emmanuel Macron, who described his presence in Japan as a game changer. It's as the White House approved plans to provide F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine and to train its pilots. President Zelensky said the move is a major boost to Kiev's air power, but Russia says it carries colossal risks for the West. Meanwhile, the head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group is claiming full control of the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. It's been the focus of the longest and bloodiest battle of the war. Ukraine's Deputy Defence Minister says the situation there is critical, but has denied the city has fallen. The leader of the group, which the UK plans to declare as a terrorist organisation, said its forces will withdraw from Bakhmut next week for rest and retraining. In other news, Labour claims there's been a big jump in the number of people dying in A&E amid record waiting times. NHS Trust figures show more than 23,000 people died in emergency departments last year. That's 22% more than the year before. The government says it's delivering a record number of tests, speeding up discharges and cutting waiting lists. Counting is continuing in the local elections in Northern Ireland. Sinn Féin has made strong gains and is on course to become the largest party in local government with 128 councillors elected. The DUP so far has 111 and the Alliance Party has 52. It's the first electoral test for the party since last year's Assembly elections and takes place against the backdrop of the Stormont stalemate. Our Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie says it's been a good election for Sinn Féin.
The DUP's vote is down about 1.2%, and the UUP, which is the very liberal unionist party, is down at around 3.2%, and the TUV is up at about 1.5%. So that means that liberal unionism is going. They are becoming, the moderate side of unionists are becoming much sterner, and they are turning away from the Good Friday Agreement. This is a massive blow for anybody that wants to get Stormont up and running again, because Christian Harris was always about threatening unionists that he would go to another election.
A man has scaled the front of the BBC building in central London in protest against a historic statue. The man has been seen hammering at the Prospero aerial statue, which has been on display since 1933. Police and rescue teams are there at the moment negotiating with him, and campaigners have been calling for its removal as the sculptor Eric Gill recorded sexually abusing his daughters in his diaries. The Metropolitan Police have been on site since the early hours of this morning and say it hasn't been possible to safely detain him yet. A man from South London will appear in court later after police found what they believe is a significant specialist weapons factory. The National Crime Agency claims the industrial unit was being used to convert blank firing guns into lethal weapons using 3D printed parts. They found more than 100 rounds of live ammunition and 1,000 rounds of blanks. Evan Girdleston is due before Croydon Magistrates Court, charged with offences under the Firearms Act. Police have seized 15 dogs and arrested 2 people after a man was killed in a dog attack in Greater Manchester. 37-year-old Jonathan Hogg was killed in Lee on Thursday. A 24-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of being in charge of a dangerously out-of-control dog causing death. And a 22-year-old woman has also been arrested on suspicion of money laundering. More than 300 jars of honey were produced last year at Buckingham Palace, with some of it being served to garden party guests. A new image of the Princess of Wales has been released to mark World Bee Day, to show royal beekeepers tending to hives at Buckingham Palace and Clarence House. The Queen is a keen beekeeper, with honey made by her bees sold at Fortnum & Mason to raise money for charity. You're up to date on GB News now. It's back to Nana.
Hello, good afternoon, welcome aboard. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time for Muck of the Week, and there's been so much going on. Let's start with the G7, an annual event for the 7 major advanced economies. I don't know, are we still one of those? Which this year has been held in Japan. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky flew in this morning, and Rishi Sunak arrived there earlier in the week with his wife. Now, some people say that the taxpayer would have paid for Rishi's wife's flight. She also went along, even though they're uber rich. Apparently, all the other major leaders brought their wives along as well. But it begs the question, do you believe that Rishi can actually relate to the man on the street, seeing as he's got so much money? Then yet another brand have decided to go the same woke way as Bud Light. Adidas, or Adidas, in their wisdom, and even after seeing the drop in sales for Bud Light after they used Dylan Mulvaney, they decided to use a man to model women's sportswear, a women's swimming costume. Really? Adidas would argue that they were emphasising the importance of breaking down gender barriers. Oh, I don't see what that's got to do with it. A man shouldn't be wearing a woman's swimming costume. Why would they be doing that? I'm not buying it, literally. I mean, if you're selling me a swimming costume and it's for women, why have you got a man modelling it? It's absolutely ridiculous. Goodbye, Adidas. Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Montecito, or should we rename them the Dukes of Hazzard, have been out for a so-called 2-hour spin, which some would say that's what this is, spin. They were apparently involved in a near-catastrophic car chase, their spokesperson's words, not mine. And it happened after Meghan gave a word salad of a speech, something about service, presumably self-service, kindness, and advocacy. Yeah, right. Yes, an advocate for breaking up families. They left the venue the back way, thereby not giving the press a chance to photograph them. A car chase ensued, resulting in H&M hopping into a yellow New York cab to apparently escape the danger. Frankly, I mean, is that really an escape? We'll talk about that more in my monologue. That's coming up at 4. And then finally, we move on to Holly and Phil. Reminds me of Rosie and Jim. Do you remember those? Do you remember them? There's apparently been a falling out. Philip's brother has been in prison for sexually abusing a teenage boy. Now, there's no suggestion that Phil was involved in any way or knew much about his brother and what he was up to. However, nonetheless, people appear to be distancing themselves from Philip. Most who have met him don't have a nice word to say. Frankly, it's time for them both to go. Qgate was the start of their decline. They've been on the sofa gathering dust for 14 years. Enough is enough. Find some new faces, ITV. It's been a mucky week. But and breaking news, after my mucky old week, it's turned even grubbier. Philip Schofield has actually stepped down now from ITV. We've heard that news just here. It's hot off the press. Stay tuned, we'll be talking about all of that later on in the show. But this is what's coming up in this hour. Comedian Lewis Shaffer will be talking to me with his top stories. We're talking about Zelensky at the G7, Adidas choosing a biological man to model a female swimming suit, Prince Harry and Meghan going on a high-speed car chase, and, of course, the intensifying rift between Holly and Phil. But we've just discovered he's stepped down. Stay tuned then at 3:20. It's climate control. The government's net zero plans could leave households nearly £120 worse off to fund the development of hydrogenic gas. Then at 3:35, I'll be joined by the flood guy, Simon Crowther, who'll be talking about sewage spills. Very nice, savoury topic. Members of the public are up in arms as water suppliers in England have announced that they could spend £10 billion using customers' money to combat the issue. Yet they've been giving out a load of cash to their shareholders. Then at 3:45, I'll be joined by property expert Ricardo Blanco. Renters are set to gain more rights to stand up to unfair landlords as part of the government's new rental reforms. But is this a step in the right direction? Stay tuned as former Tory Minister Ann Widdecombe will join me for Political Spotlight to dish all the juicy gossip. And all of that is on the way in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Well, joining me now is stand-up comedian Lewis Shaffer. Lewis, very good. Right, so how have you been? You've been all right?
I've been all right. I'm dressed casually, so I don't know, it might be a new look for the people out there, but you said I looked all right.
I think you look good.
You are beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
And you know what it's like when you look beautiful, you are beautiful.
You are beautiful. Not always. Some people are pretty ugly inside. No names will be mentioned on this.
Right.
So let's start with G7. We are one of the 7 important nations.
Right now we are.
Don't talk Britain down.
Yeah, I'm not talking it down.
Too many people.
But I think what's amazing about these G7, G8s, G20s, whatever they are, it's like the football. It's like there's relegation and promotion, which is the best thing about this country, is that a team can be relegated and be once on top and be all the way down, or be on the bottom and go all the way to the top. And if Britain doesn't keep on fighting, I don't want to put the country down because it's an amazing country.
We love it. I love the United Kingdom. It's amazing.
It is amazing because it's our home at the moment, and my kids and my kids are English. But it's the thing about the G7 thing is that it's a list of countries, believe it or not, that are losing in the world, and all the countries are countries. One point, the G7 made up 70 or 80% of the entire GNP. Is that the right word? GDP of the entire world, and now it's, I think, 44%. So we're heading down into oblivion. So maybe it's best that we stay together because we're going to need each other.
Well, we're all sinking together in the same place on the same boat.
Yeah, that's
same ship.
This is the G7 boat, and then we're seeing. I mean, and they bring Zelensky in, who's a comedian, or I guess he's an ex-comedian. You know, there's a saying that show me when comedians are bored, when comedians are bored with with comedy, they go into politics. And when politicians are bored with politics, they go into comedy.
Very good, I like that.
Yeah, I made that up.
Did you? I knew you did. I was thinking that. What's Boris Johnson? Is he a comedian? What's he?
Well, he's become a comedian.
He was funny at the beforehand, though, wasn't he?
Did he start off being funny or not? I never found him that funny.
I thought he was quite good. I thought he was good. But listen, we're going to have some more on the latest breaking news that ITV presenter Philip Schofield will step down from this morning with immediate effect. Yes, that's what's happening. Yeah, immediate effect. So what do you think with regard to Holly and Phil, then?
Well, I think television is a dying medium.
No.
Except for us.
Of course.
Except for us, yeah. I think who's interested in ITV anymore? Is anybody interested in ITV? Is anybody interested in the BBC? They're not even a media company. They're state propaganda service. Am I allowed to say that?
No, I think you're probably right there. Yeah. That's the thing.
Right. So I don't think ITV has the cachet that it used to have. Not that I would know. I've never watched it, so I don't know. I just think at the end of my assessment from a distance is I think people liked a man with grey hair. They like me. They like grey hair, and I think they found him warm and cuddly without being too threatening, and they liked her. But over time, you get bored with people. They've been together for like 13 years.
It's 14 years actually. Too long, man.
14 years. It's quite a long time. Have you ever been married for 14 years?
I've never been married. Nobody wants me.
I do want you.
Do you? Tell your wife that. She's watching now. She won't be very happy with you.
She won't be happy, but she's going to have to learn to live with it. You know, it is. Men have hypergamy too. They always want something better. And I think the two of us together would be an amazing. I wouldn't say we'd be a power couple. You would have the power, and I would be following you around. Basically.
So what do you think then? Do you think so? ITV? Do you think Holly will go as well?
I don't think so now. I think she's well liked at the present moment, and I think it's time for a change. Normally, it's interesting because normally it's the guy who kicks the girl out for something better, but in this case, it's not. I don't think it's going to be that way. You can see I don't want to say anything bad about him because we don't know what the truth is.
Well,
like
listen. Well, do you know what Philip is Scof on his I think it's Instagram or Twitter or one of them. Yeah. He says, I've always been proud to cover fascinating stories on This Morning, but recently This Morning itself has become the story. Throughout my career in TV, including the very difficult last few days, I've always done my best to be honourable and kind. I understand that ITV has decided the current situation can't go on, and I want to do what I can to protect the show that I love. So I have agreed to step down from This Morning with immediate effect in the hope that the show can move forward to a bright future. I'd like to thank everyone who has supported me, especially This Morning's amazing viewers, and I'll see you all for the Soap Awards next month. That's what he said.
It's so funny that that's such a British thing. The idea of somebody resigning, it's like no one gets fired in this place. Everybody steps on there. There must be a lot of swords out there because they're always stepping on their sword. They're always, when was the last person you heard was fired? They're always demanding people resign. This person's done the worst job ever, and he was brought into the office and he was told you resign.
Or else, but you know what? To be honest, I couldn't give two hoots. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't give a stuff about it. I watched the show years ago when I was at university. I loved it when Richard and Judy were on. And one time I remember Richard telling Judy, how could you, Judy? Don't say that. I told everybody. And I used to love their dynamics. But these two, I'd rather watch paint dry, to be honest with you. I'm glad that because I think ultimately ITV, they seem to be regurgitating the same old people all the time. I mean, Ann and Dec, I love them, God bless them, but again, have they not got? There's so many talented people in this country.
Nana, they're going to say that about us someday.
Well, I'm not going to cling on like that.
Well, we should cling on. Why wouldn't you cling on? No. He still has millions of people who love the guy.
No, but nobody's saying that people don't love him. It's just that really, I think that people, you need to rejuvenate things. I should be careful. I talk myself out of a job. You've been on for too long. Yeah. But I tend to move around anyway. I think, I do a bit of this, I do a bit of that. I like to have a bit more, going on.
That's something else about this country. It's like your TV shows are like 6 episodes. In America, they're 250 episodes because they say it was just perfect the way it was. But the truth is, it's like a marriage. It's like TV is like a marriage. You just get to know the people. You go through bad times, maybe a couple of months, a couple of years. You hate the person, but you stick with them. And maybe that's what's lost in this world, is we don't stick with people. I say I don't know the guy, but I'm against firing
Well,
anybody.
a lot of people haven't got such great things to say about him. Let's move on to Harry and Meghan. Harry and Meghan, what do you think? They are, this is some sort... You're from America.
I'm from New York.
You're from New York. You'll know
I live right near where the police where that chase was.
Can you have some sort of... go on then, talk to me. What's it like around there? Can you get a high speed... I mean, they didn't apparently say the words high speed.
Yeah.
That was the mayor of New York who used the word high speed.
Yeah.
But you know how these two like to gaslight and allow the wrong words to come out? If it was wrong, they should correct it. They haven't, so...
Right.
You know.
Well, I think it could be possible to have a high-speed chase, but for a very short time.
In between the lights?
In between the lights, or even running through the lights, or the way the lights are staggered, you could have kind of a high-speed chase. I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about these people, because they got their own emotional problems. I so feel for them. I even feel for Meghan, because she's a black woman,
What's
right?
that got to do with it?
I'm going to tell you what it has to do with it. She's black, unlike you, who's beautiful and black.
Yeah.
We know you're black, but she doesn't look black.
Well, that's the thing about it. If you don't look black, then you're not black to people who look at you. So
right,
you can't
exactly.
really then
so
say you're black.
She's got to say, like me, why is it...
She's not black, she's mixed.
Do you know something? In her mind, her mother is black. That makes her... In her mind, that makes... I believe. I'm just guessing.
But she didn't... even on... I mean, like, as reports are to be believed, even on, say, things like resumes and things like that, she didn't say she was going with the Caucasian side.
That doesn't mean she wasn't thinking it.
No, but...
That doesn't mean she wasn't feeling it.
But what's that got to do with the price of fish anyway? What's that got to do with the car chase that she's black?
It has to do with... It doesn't have anything to do with
No, nothing at all, does it?
No, it has something to do with...
She's just Meghan Markle, forget
It has something to do with her dragging her mother along with her, who is basically her proof that she's black. Her proof. It's like me.
You didn't know.
It's like me wearing a yarmulke or maybe a Jewish star on my chest to let people know that I'm black. You know.
So she takes her mother along with her.
She takes her mother. Look, I'm black. Look, here's a black mother, and whatever. So it doesn't mean much, but he is also, and she's damaged. Something horrible happened to her as a child. She's damaged.
What do you think? No, nothing horrible happened to her. She's obviously, like, her dad has looked after her really nicely. All the reports you hear is how he
Obviously
helped her
not, no,
financially.
because there's bitterness between the two of them.
Well, only because he sold some stories, but I think that's a bit ironic.
Yeah, but why would he sell stories?
Well, that wasn't actually... He actually told the full story on GBNews a while ago, and it wasn't quite as it is.
As it is. But why does she hate him? She must hate him for a particular reason.
Well, because she thinks that he betrayed her, I think. But let's be fair, I think she's more than made up for his betrayal, if that's what she thinks.
That's a very good point. But can I mention this? And I'm going to just say something. I love Britain, and this is my children's home, okay? But you have I don't like the royal family. I know this is not the right thing to say on GB News, and maybe it's because an American stop me if you think I'm going too far, but I don't like the royal family. And I think what Prince Charles, when he was prince, did to Harry's mother...
Well, but he didn't do anything to her. I mean, I didn't like that either, but
yeah, so we know he did something.
Because he hadn't he was seeing somebody else at the same time. But it was the love of his life.
It doesn't matter, but we
I don't
can't
think
do
it's
that.
acceptable.
When we get married,
that's wrong.
When we get married, I'm going to say to my wife,
that was wrong.
I can't see you anymore. I'm sorry, but I'm making this all up. I don't have a wife. I don't have a. Anyway, this is what I'm saying. Don't let me talk myself into trouble here, okay?
Get on with it. You got 10 seconds.
My 10 seconds is that Prince Harry is very angry at his dad, and it's so tragic.
It is very tragic. Lewis, when are you back on?
When am I back on? What?
Not here.
On headline.
Yeah, we're headliners.
I'm on tonight. You can come see me tonight.
Yeah.
You can come see me, Lewis Shaffer. I've got a calendar. I didn't show you the calendar. I didn't bring my calendar.
No, thank you, Lewis. No, thank you.
I was going to bring it out and give it to you. I think maybe you needed it.
How kind. Coming up to 21 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GBNews on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, I'll be joined by Showbiz reporter to discuss this Philip Schofield stepping down from this morning. Stay tuned. The flood guy will be on at 3:35. We're talking about water and all the sewage spills. And then we've got climate control on the way. According to reports, net zero could push your energy bills up by 120 quid a year. Stay tuned, that's all on the way after this.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's coming up to 25 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and now it's time for climate control. And this week, we've had the news that net zero could push energy bills up by £120 a year. Now, that extra cost could be added to household bills from 2025 to help fund the development of hydrogen gas. Families will also be contributing to subsidies for other green energy, such as wind farms, under provisions in the new energy bill, as the government strives to meet its target of net zero by 2050. Well, joining me to discuss is Lois Perry. She's the director of Car 26, and also meteorologist Jim Dale. Right, I'm going to start with you, Jim Dale.
Thank you.
So talk to me. Why are we going to be paying more? Why is there this push for this extra 120 quid?
We usually come on this programme, we normally get a little bit of an argument going or a debate going, let's just say.
I'll tell you
I actually agree that this is a false step. Hydrogen is not the direction of travel. It will only reduce the net zero capacity by about 4%. So whilst it's useful for big industry, it's absolutely right, and I don't often agree with the Telegraph, very rarely. But I think the government is going in the wrong direction with this. They're pushing the wrong barrel, if that makes sense. Hydrogen isn't the answer. It might be for the big industrials, that's where it might be useful, but for households, I don't think so.
Lewis, what do you think?
Yeah, Jim and I agree on something.
My God.
So none of this makes any sense whatsoever unless you actually look at following the money, because it makes a huge amount of sense to people that are receiving subsidies to do this. But the amount of energy that you actually get from burning hydrogen, from using the actual energy, is equal to the amount of energy it takes to separate the hydrogen from the water or from the gas. But hey, guess what? We've got an amazing hydrogen-rich fuel already. It's called gas, which we have in abundance and which we should be using. And we should be using that until we can afford, or we can afford probably now, to build nuclear, which is amazing. And it's 24/7 and lasts 60 years and ends up being 6 times cheaper than offshore wind. And that's with all of the subsidies removed. So the whole hydrogen thing, like all of the renewable thing, is a racket.
No, it's not. It's not all of the renewables at all. Hydrogen is one little part of it. I've already said that I tend to agree with you on this. And you know what? I really believe we should be moving away from the climate change issue in terms of whether there is climate change or whether there isn't climate change. No, it's absolutely not.
Right. Is it
it's because we should be talking about mitigation and safety. So, for example, today we're talking about this, which is fair enough, absolutely. But look what's happened this week in Italy. Look at the devastation that's occurred there and the deaths that have occurred and the damage that have occurred, and that is a climate change-driven event. So that's where we should be. We can talk about mitigation measures as we are now, all the different ones, till the cows come on. We can have a good debate, and some things we'll agree on and some things we will not.
I absolutely love the way that your side of the argument uses absolutely everything to prove that climate change is real. You know why? It's why they changed it from global warming recently to climate change.
It's the same
thing. Because there's been no warming for nearly 10 years.
Sorry,
well, no, hang on, I'm going to stop there. You said that global warming is the same as climate change. It's not really, is it? Because climate change...
No, OK.
No, hang on, sorry. Let me finish. Because climate change, the climate could go down, it could be cooler, or it could get warmer. It could go either way. So global warming isn't...
Global warming is happening anyway, but the problem with climate change is it has many facets, many faces. So we saw one of those in the winter time. It doesn't mean global warming does not mean the Earth just continues to warm up.
Hang on, I thought that's what we
year after year after year. No, on average it will do. The graph will be upwards, but you do get what I call chaos, what we call chaos, where the climate actually mixes itself up.
Basically, what you're saying is that absolutely every single thing that happens proves your argument.
No, because there's weather within that. That's not a case of that. But you've got to look. No, you've got to look. So for example, now, what happened this week? The WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, came out and said 1.5 degrees will be surpassed in the next 5 years.
So what?
Well, so what?
No, but what? Tell me.
Lois,
so what? Why?
Lois, what if your body temperature goes up by 1.5 degrees? How do you feel?
Maybe my body will self-regulate.
No, it will not. You'll be in bed.
Well, no, hold on. She has got a point. We have what we call... Well, let me finish. Homeostasis, which is where the body regulates itself. It comes back into where it should be. What makes you think that the planet won't have other mechanisms that will get it back to where it needs to be?
Simply because...
Feedback. I know that in a lot of the projections, they haven't taken that on board.
Simply because what we've got at the moment is huge acceleration. That's the problem. It's the speed of change. Everybody will look. Lois, do you believe that climate change is happening, irrespective of whether it's man-made or not?
Climate changes all the time. I'm sponsoring an event tonight, a Toby Young event, and one of the things that we're showcasing is 1,200 scientists who signed a Clinton Declaration saying they don't agree with you. And the person that actually did this declaration is a Nobel-winning prize-winning scientist. Do you have a Nobel Prize?
I don't have a Nobel Prize myself. Do you?
Well, you don't.
I'm
not talking about me.
If you're going to throw 1,200 scientists at me, I will throw probably 30,000, 40,000 at you.
Paid off.
You know why are they paid off and the oily lot are not?
Hang on. Can you let him finish? Because he's counteracting.
This is all one-sided. You know, you look at the fossil fuel industry, and not all of it. They're trying to change. Make that absolutely clear. Some are not. Some come out right out of Tufton Street, 55 Tufton Street, who feed the information to. I'm not saying to people like yourself, many of them may be. You see them all over Twitter. It's a diatribe of information. I'm trying to get to a point, Lois, where we can start to agree, not on whether you'll never agree whether climate change is happening in terms of the man-made side of things, but where we should be going. We're all in favour of green and safety and an environment that's clean and not polluted. Is anybody against that?
I totally agree with you.
But hang on, but I think you're conflating two things, really, because a polluted river, I will speak and you won't interrupt me and ask me the question.
Please do.
I'm speaking. That's very nice of you.
Okay.
But I'll be doing the speaking and I'll be doing all of that side of things. So You're conflating two things, in my view. One of them is the environment. So, for example, people throwing plastic in the rivers, that's one thing. But then the other thing is climate change, which is something different. These two are, whilst they have an impact on each other, one is about environmental pollution with regards to things like plastic in the oceans and things like that, where the other one is the actual climate.
I think you're right. They're sisters. Let me put it that way. It's
they
environment.
Might be sisters, but they're not the same thing. OK, thank you very much to Lewis Perry.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to talk to you. Stay right there. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, we were discussing Philip Schofield because it's big news, just to remind you, that he will be stepping down from this morning with immediate effect. This is what, in a statement, he said, I've always been proud to cover fascinating stories on This Morning, but recently This Morning itself has become the story. Throughout my career in TV, including the very difficult last few days, I have always done my best to be honourable and kind. I understand that ITV have decided the current situation can't go on, and I want to do what I can to protect the show that I love. So I've agreed to step down from This Morning with immediate effect in the hope that the show can move forward to a bright future. I'd like to thank everyone who has supported me, especially This Morning's amazing viewers, and I'll see you all for the Soap Awards next month. Right. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, it's the Flood Guy. Simon Crowther will be joining me live in the studio to discuss all things water. The suppliers are ready to spend, ready to spend 10 billion on tackling sewage spills, but it's going to come from your pocket. Is that fair? What do you think? After your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom at 3:30. Philip Schofield has announced he's stepping down from ITV's flagship morning show This Morning with immediate effect. After co-hosting the programme for more than 2 decades, ITV announced he won't be returning, with Thursday's show being his last. On social media, Mr Schofield said the current situation can't go on and that he wanted to protect the show he loved. It's after his brother, Timothy Schofield, was jailed for 12 years after being convicted of child sex offences yesterday. World leaders have welcomed Ukraine's president to the G7 summit in Japan.
Good to see you. How are you? Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Bye, guys.
Volodymyr Zelensky met with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who reiterated the UK's ongoing support for the country in its fight against Russia. He also met with French President Emmanuel Macron, who described his presence in Japan as a game changer. It says the White House approved plans to provide F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine and to train its pilots. President Zelensky said the move is a major boost to Kyiv's air power, but Russia says it carries colossal risks for the West. Meanwhile, the head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group is claiming full control of the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. It's been the focus of the longest and bloodiest battle of the war. Ukraine's Deputy Defence Minister says the situation is critical, but denies the city has fallen. The leader of the group, which the UK plans to declare as a terrorist organisation, says its forces will withdraw next week for rest and retraining. And counting is continuing in the local elections in Northern Ireland. Sinn Féin has made strong gains and is on course to become the largest party in local government, with 128 councillors elected so far. The DUP currently has 111 and the Alliance Party has 53. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Stay tuned. We'll have Ann Widdecombe. We'll be discussing in Political Spotlight. The Flood Guy is on the way next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. It's fast approaching 39 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, joining me now, because we're discussing this whole debacle with Philip Schofield, is Showbiz journalist Sarah Robertson. Sarah, thank you very much for joining us. Now, of course, Philip Schofield will be stepping down from ITV this morning. Holly Willoughby said that it's been over 13 great years presenting this morning with Philip, and I want to make this opportunity to thank him for all his knowledge, his experience and his humour. The sofa won't feel the same without him. Kevin Ligo, Managing Director of ITV Media and Entertainment, said that Philip is hands down one of the best broadcasters of his generation, and we thank him for his 2 decades worth of absolutely terrific television on the This Morning sofa. Right, let's go to our guest. Where is Sarah? Sarah's joining us now.
Hello. Hi, Nana. I'm afraid you can't see me, but you should be able to hear me, I think.
We can hear you loud and clear, Sarah. Now, the thing is, I mean, this is a big deal for ITV. Do you think he jumped before he was pushed?
Well, this is the question, Nana, that you've asked. Yes, the situation had become untenable, really. And as Philip said himself in the statement, he said this morning had become the story. And when the presenter becomes the story and takes over from the show and the viewers lose faith in you, you really don't have a future on the sofa. So the situation had become untenable. And it was a case of all week, all of the media, we've been waiting and wondering, we've been talking about it non-stop. Will he walk or will he be pushed? And we've seen today he's decided to walk. But I think it's been with a great big almighty push. He does not have now the backing or support of Kevin Ligo. He said himself in this statement, ITV has decided the current situation can't go on. So that in itself tells you everything you need to know. And he says about protecting the show and those that he loves, which is Holly Willoughby, who's been his colleague. So he said the language he used was to agree to step down. He's saying he's stepping down with the media effect, but there's been so much tension behind the scenes. and plotting and engineering and will he, won't he? And it's obviously being told to him, look, we can't go on like this anymore. It's become untenable. Something has to give and we've got to save the show. So he's had to go. He's had no choice. He couldn't carry on. It reminds me of this government.
I'll be honest with you, Sarah, I'm quite pleased to see the back of him. I mean, I'm sick
yes, I know you're not a fan.
There's a lot of people who aren't fans of his.
Sorry, Nana.
You would have thought he would have gone after Qgate if that's his reasoning, that, he'd become the story, because he was the story then.
They both should have. They both should have after Qgate. They got away with it. And they, he's hung on and he's hung on and he's hung on. And then this has happened. And we've obviously seen the court case yesterday. His brother was jailed for 11 years, if I remember that correctly. And the whole thing has just looked really tawdry and murky this week. And it's dragging down the show. And when you become bigger than the show itself, you can't stay on it.
Well, listen, Sarah, thank you very much for that. It's good to hear your thoughts on that and what you think has been going on. Let's have a chat with Rebecca Toomey. She's also she's a Showbiz expert as well. She'll be able to talk to us about this. Rebecca, I've been honest about it. I'm quite glad to see the back of him. I think they've been on the sofa for way too long, gathering dust. He should have gone. They should have both gone after Qgate. What's your take on it?
I'm really actually surprised that Philip has come to this and made this decision. And Holly's statement actually says quite a lot. She hasn't talked about their friendship. She's just basically said thank you for his knowledge, his experience and his humour. She hasn't really drawn reference to, the many years they worked together, the relationship they had. And it's interesting because Philip Schofield was the golden boy of ITV. I can't see how he could have made this decision himself. As we just mentioned, the news yesterday with his brother being sentenced for child sex offences and the fact that what came out from the court case is that Philip was aware of it. And it's interesting that, this has all been very much glossed over and it's really clever PR that the focus was on this tension between Holly and Phil. But really, I think the real story here is that he knew what his brother was doing and just told him to stop. And it didn't really seem like he did anything else to sort of prevent that. I think that's the real shocking part of this story. But in showbiz, we like to see presenting juries, we like to see tension. I think it's interesting that for the first time, ITV are actually stepping up and it seems to be supporting Holly, because what's happened in the past with ITV, when you look at someone like Ant McPartlin, he was very much supported by ITV when he was going through his issues with prescription painkillers. He stepped aside from I'm a Celebrity, whereas when you look at what happened with Caroline Flack, when she was going through, a court case, ITV, suspended her and she had to step down. So it's interesting that, suddenly this case has come about and Philip is really sort of, within 24 hours, he's gone. And it'd be interesting to see who steps up. There are reports this morning about Alison Hammond sitting there with Holly Willoughby. But the interesting thing is, will Holly survive? There's lots of criticism around Holly saying that
she should go as well. I think they should both go. I mean, she should go as well. But there was that whole debacle with his wife when he, came out as being gay. And I mean, frankly, he'd been cheating on his wife. It's like, and everyone got behind him. And it was as far as we know, this is as far as we know, that he was he came out as gay and he's married. So that means that if you're gay and you're married and you've come out with it, then clearly there's, you've realised that. And that's just not fair, is it? And everyone sort of kind of got behind him as if, it's terrible, poor Phil. I felt sorry for his wife.
I think not Phil felt sorry for his wife, but I think the main question here is, if we're going to sort of step aside from his personal life, is he a brilliant broadcaster and is he the best man for the job? He is a fantastic broadcaster. He's got 20 years experience just on, This Morning alone. He has a phenomenal amount of talent and experience. And it's just what we've got to really assess, really. If we want from our TV presenters and our celebrities to be perfect people, or do we want to be brilliant at their jobs? Is he the best man for the job? Is his sex life of really interest to viewers?
But that's a step too far. I mean, there's too much on him. There's too much on him, Rebecca. I'm glad he's gone. Rebecca, thank you very much for joining me. That's Rebecca Tony. Thank you so much. So if you've just joined us, welcome on board. It's GBNews. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Of course, Philip Schofield has stepped down from ITV. That is the breaking news. We'll be talking about that throughout the show. But let's talk about water. Water suppliers say that they are ready to spend £10 billion on tackling sewage spills, but it's going to come from your pocket. Yes, that's right. These privately owned companies have apologised for not acting quickly enough, despite the fact that they've given their shareholders plenty of cash to tackle sewage spills, as they're facing mounting public anger over continued disposal of raw sewage into the rivers and seas. Last year, Raw sewage was dumped into rivers about 825 times on a day on average. That's ridiculous. So joining me now is civil engineer and chartered water environment manager Simon Crowther. Simon, they've got a nerve, haven't they?
It's a really interesting point that I think actually the government will be breathing a sigh of relief, because water companies have come out and said, we're sorry. And there's been a lot of pressure on the government to act. And actually, if we look at regulatory failure, there's been a lot of regulatory failure here. The government have really defunded the regulation, which has allowed water companies to effectively do as they please and channel the money off to the shareholders. Again, it's very easy to sort of look at shareholders as though, you know, they're all internationals taking the money, but some of them might be pensioners as well. So there's been this sort of drive to fund the shareholders. The money's obviously gone, and now we need to invest in the system. We've got a really ageing system, a Victorian system, particularly in London, where both the foul water, so the water from your toilet, and the water from the rain all goes into one. Every time it rains, we can't cope with that, so it gets dumped into the rivers. And that's the same across the country. We've got a really ageing infrastructure.
But weren't they given their licences with conditions as to what they must do? And the whole thing about dropping sewage was supposed to be only occasionally.
Yeah.
And they have taken the proverbial, frankly. So now and the government haven't fined them enough. They haven't been hard enough on them. Ofwat, I think it is, have been pretty slack.
Yeah, Ofwat and the Environment Agency, but that's because the regulator's been so defunded, which is, I think, why the government now will be so relieved that actually it's eyes on the water companies and eyes on where's that money been going, not eyes on what's the regulatory failure been. So I think it's always the story behind the headline as well. We've got to dig a bit deeper. Yes, it's good that the water companies are acknowledging the issue, but it's not good that we're going to effectively have to pay for it again. And it's not good that this has even happened, and it's taken public pressure to get to this point.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it? I don't see why we're paying for it. They should be getting it off their shareholders. They make enough profit. Our bills are going to go up. Surprise, surprise. Simon, thank you very much. Lovely to talk to you. That is Simon Crowther. Oh, God, more bills, of course. Everything seems to go up all the time, but that's the way of the world, isn't it? Now, let's talk about this one. This is a big one because there's a lot of people who live in rented accommodation, and they're set to gain more rights to stand up to unfair landlords as part of the government's new rental reforms. The bill will ban so-called no-fault evictions, and it'll be easier for landlords to repossess their property for missed payments or antisocial behaviour. But with the housing crisis looming, there are fears that the shake-up will also push landlords to sell up, leading to a shortage of properties to rent. So with me now to discuss this is property expert and landlord Ricardo Blanco. Ricardo Blanco with the fabulous
nice
teeth.
To see you.
Fabulous teeth, Ricardo, I must say.
Oh.
Now, talk to me about this, because I know that you also work with the NRLA as well.
Yes.
I think from the side of a landlord, because I've been a landlord and I also have lived in rented accommodation, I do a bit of both. I don't think this is a good thing, getting rid of Section 21 in that manner. Is it a good or bad thing?
Well, there's a political consensus now around getting rid of so-called no-fault eviction. It could work if we manage to beef up the courts. The problem is the courts are too slow. It takes at least 6 months to go through the courts if you have to. And what's going to happen is, many more cases will end up going through the courts once these changes come in. The changes are likely to come in about 18 months' time, and that's, precious little time, really, for the courts to get up to speed. So that's one of the main concerns I think landlords have. NRLA research tells us that 33% of landlords are thinking of selling up some or all of their properties in the next year. And what that's going to do is mean there's going to be further shortage of supply, rents are likely to go up, and it's going to be harder for people to get rented properties. So it is a big concern.
It's like they haven't thought it through, because not only that, as a landlord, what landlords sometimes do is they put in rent protection, which protects their rent if the tenant defaults. And in order to get rent protection, the tenant must be assessed, so they go through some financial checks to make sure that they qualify. Then you get the protection. If with their new goals, which are you can take on people who are social services or whatever, people on benefits and stuff like that, which is fine. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. How will it work with regard to those rent protection companies? Because they'll look on it and say, well, did they pass this qualifying aspect? And then if they don't, then you can't get protection for that rent. And the government is saying that you have to take on people irrespective of different things, and it's checks and balances that you might put in place.
You're right, Nana. The government wants to ban so-called no DSS, not taking people on benefits, and also not taking parents with children or families. Now, currently, if you want to get rent protection insurance, you can't get it if your tenants are on benefits.
That's right.
So certainly, I think insurance companies are going to have to look at that again, and who knows what will happen with that. I think the other issue is that LHA rates, which is the housing benefit that people get, have been frozen since 2021, and actually those benefits don't add up enough to cover the rent. And really, certainly what we've been campaigning for as well is for the government to unfreeze those rates so that people on benefits have a better chance of getting a rental property.
So do you feel this is a plan that hasn't really been thoroughly thought through? Because as you pointed out with the court system, 6 months is how long it would normally take, if you're lucky, to evict someone under, that's a Section 8 to do that.
That's right, yes.
If they got rid of Section 21. But then if it's taking 6 months, the landlord would have to sort of look after that process in between. But the court system is really, really slow. So even if they do come up with a better mechanism, you'll still be waiting in the court system.
Yes, exactly. And of course, what can happen is you get a possession order, but it still takes a further 2 or 3 months for a bailiff to actually remove the tenant. Now, that's in exceptional cases. You know, eviction is always the last resort. But I think a lot of landlords will be very nervous until we see improvement in the court system, and we may see a greater sell-off, yes.
Well, Ricardo, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I could talk to you for ages about this. We will talk about it in more detail another time. Thank you very much, Ricardo Blanco. He's a housing and property expert. Well, if you just tuned in, welcome on board. It's coming up to 53 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua, and it is now time for Political Spotlight. I'm delighted to say that former Tory Minister Ann Widdecombe will be joining me. She became an MP for Maidstone and the Weald back in 1987 and rose through the ranks in the Tory party under former Prime Minister John Major. Now, she was a Minister of State for Prisons and was known for her tough stance on crime, and has since joined the Reform Party post-Brexit. And away from politics, she has also made some unforgettable appearances on Strictly Come Dancing, delighting audiences with her unique moves. I'm pleased to say that Ann Widdecombe joins me now. Ann, thank you very much for joining me for Political Spotlight. We always want to know what it's like for politicians and, you know, what it's like to be a politician. But now you've kind of come away from the sort of mainstay of it when you were with the Conservative Party. You've now joined Reform. Why?
I had become steadily disillusioned with the Conservatives over Brexit. The nation voted to leave the EU. Therefore, I thought, very naively, that we would leave the EU. But then Theresa May particularly just stalled and stalled, and there was no progress being made. The deal wasn't acceptable. Parliament wouldn't pass it. And I got very frustrated, so I joined the Brexit Party, and that was after 55 years of being in the Conservative Party. I began in the Young Conservatives. And I joined the Brexit Party, won the Brexit Party, in my view, very prematurely dissolved. I then stayed politically homeless for a while because I had various doubts about reform. But there was no question ever of going back to the Conservatives while they're in their present state. So I've joined Reform.
Yeah, it's such a shame. In the Conservative Party, I don't know what they're doing. They're just eating themselves from the inside out, frankly, and they won't stop. Why? It's time. The meal's over. The snack's over. Stop eating yourselves, but they won't stop. But to go backwards, why did you get into politics to begin with?
When I was growing up, the world was very sharply divided into two great conflicting political ideologies, communism versus capitalism, and its manifestation was the Cold War. And everybody knew which side of that argument they were on. In countries such as ours, it wasn't communism, it was socialism versus capitalism. But it was real socialism, it wasn't Tony Blair, it was red in tooth and claw. And everybody knew which side of that argument they were on. And they knew it with their head, their heart, their very gut. And so I knew that I did not want socialism, that I would fight socialism to the bitter end. And that was why I became a Member of Parliament.
So if you hadn't done this, and would you have got into perhaps dancing? What would you have done if you hadn't got into politics, Anne?
I certainly wouldn't have gone into dancing. I've never danced in my life. I can tell you, Anton called that many things, but he never called it dancing. Never once. So I certainly wouldn't have gone into dancing. I think actually I would have probably taught Latin in a girls' school. In fact, for years, that's what I thought I was going to do. But once I decided I wanted to be a politician, teaching was an impractical choice because I couldn't have gone to party conference, say, you know, in the middle of term in October. Of course, I couldn't. I couldn't have just gone and visited selection committees all over the country. It would have been completely incompatible. So I abandoned the teaching idea.
Well, finally, Anne, do you feel that the Conservatives have any chance of winning this next election?
Well, I really can't see it. Keir Starmer does not deserve to win. He will be twice as disastrous for the country as Rishi is. So I hope he doesn't win, but I cannot see at the moment any way by which the Conservatives can win, because although Rishi Sunak has a very steady hand on the tiller, he has no idea where his ship is going.
Well, I don't think any of them have any idea where the ship is going, Anne. Listen, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, Anne. Thank you so much for joining me. That is, of course, Ann Widdecombe. She was in my political spotlight. Thank you so much. If you just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, I've got my monologue. I'll be discussing Harry and Meghan and the Dukes of Hazzard, that fabulous car chase throughout New York. Remember that one? We'll be discussing that and so much more coming up in the next hour. Stay tuned. More in the next hour.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today, it's broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former editor of the Labourist Peter Edwards. Before we get started, smile, Peter. Let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom.
Philip Schofield has announced that he's stepping down from ITV's flagship daytime show this morning with immediate effect. ITV has also confirmed that he won't be returning despite 2 decades at the helm, with last Thursday's show being his final one. Co-host Holly Willoughby will not be leaving. On social media, Mr Schofield said he wanted to protect the show that he loved. It's after his brother, Timothy Schofield, was jailed for 12 years after being convicted of child sex offences. Well, world leaders have welcomed Ukraine's president to the G7 summit in Japan.
Good to see you. How are you? Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Bye, guys.
Volodymyr Zelensky met with the UK's Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who said the invite demonstrated the international community's steadfast support for Ukraine against Russian aggression. French President Emmanuel Macron described his presence as a game changer towards peace. Well, that's as the White House approved plans to provide F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine and to train its pilots. President Zelensky has repeatedly lobbied Western allies for air support and hailed the move as historic, saying it will greatly enhance Ukraine's army in the sky. The plans are expected to be rolled out in the coming weeks and months, but Russia says it carries colossal risks for the West. Well, meanwhile, the head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group is claiming full control of the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. It's been the focus of the longest and bloodiest battle of the war. Ukraine's deputy defence minister says the situation is critical, but denies that the city has fallen. The leader of the group, which the UK plans to declare as a terrorist organisation, says its forces will withdraw next week for rest and retraining. The Labour Party claims there's been a big jump in the number of people dying in A&E amid record waiting times. Their analysis of NHS trust figures show that more than 23,000 people died in emergency departments last year. That's a 22% increase on 2021's figures. The government says it's delivering a record number of tests, speeding up discharges and cutting waiting lists. Counting continues in the local elections in Northern Ireland, with just over 50 seats left to declare. Sinn Féin has made strong gains and is on course to become the largest party in local government, with 131 councillors so far. The DUP currently has 113 and the Alliance Party 55. It's the first electoral test for the parties since last year's Assembly elections and takes place against the backdrop of the Stormont stalemate. Our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie says the political landscape in the country is changing.
The DUP's vote is down about 1.2%, and the UUP, which is the very liberal unionist party, is down at around 3.2%. And the TUV is up at about 1.5%. So that means that liberal unionism is going. They are becoming, the moderate side of unionists are becoming much sterner, and they are turning away from the Good Friday Agreement. This is a massive blow for anybody that wants to get Stormont up and running again, because Chris Harris was always about threatening unionists that he would go to another election.
Well, a man has scaled the front of the BBC building in central London in protest against a historic statue. The man has been seen hammering at the Prospero and Ariel statue, which has been on display since 1933. Police and rescue teams are there negotiating with him. Campaigners have been calling for its removal, as the sculptor, Eric Gill, admitted in his diaries that he had sexually abused his daughters. Police have seized 15 dogs and arrested 2 people after a fatal dog attack in Greater Manchester. 37-year-old Jonathan Hogg was killed in Lee on Thursday. A 24-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of being in charge of a dangerously out-of-control dog causing death. And a 22-year-old woman has also been arrested on suspicion of money laundering. More than 300 jars of honey were produced last year at Buckingham Palace, with some of it being served to garden party guests. A new image of the Princess of Wales has been released to mark World Bee Day, showing royal beekeepers tending to hives at Buckingham Palace and Clarence House. The Queen is a keen beekeeper, with honey made by her bees, sold at Fortnum and Mason to raise money for charity. OK, this is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Nana.
Hello, good afternoon. It's just coming up to 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Well, it's all coming out now. After giving this gobbledygook word salad of a speech at the Women of Vision Awards.
Just never too late to start. You can be the visionary of your own life. You can charter a path in which what you repeat in your daily acts of service, in kindness, in advocacy, in grace, and in fairness, that those become the very things that are recognized by the next wave of women, both young and old.
You can be the visionary of your own life? Yeah, right. Harry had no chance once she plotted him on her mood Ouija board thingy. You can charter a path in which what you repeat in your daily acts of service, in kindness, advocacy, grace, and in fairness. What a load of tosh. The day I look to someone like that to give me advice, I'm in trouble. She's the worst example of it if I ever heard. I mean, where is her kindness? She went on Oprah when Prince Philip was dying. Advocacy. Advocacy for what? Breaking up families? She knows all about that. Did she say grace or was it disgrace? How about you go and see your dying dad? And as for fairness, don't make me laugh. How is it fair to allow the Queen to go to her grave with people and, in fact, the world believing that the royal family were racist, only for the two of them to gaslight everyone? None of that is fair. She goes on to say, who will join the movement and make our movement into an equitable world? Doesn't even make any sense. It's nonsensical. Said in a soft voice to make it sound convincing. Claptrap. On leaving the event, instead of posing for a few press pictures, as is customary with most famous people, after which the press then leave them alone, the Duke and Duchess of Hazzard decided to exit via the back door and go on what can only be called a wild goose chase up and down the same street for a so-called 2 hours to try and ditch the press, a journey that they later described as near catastrophic. Their spokesperson said, being a public figure comes to the level of interest from the public. It should never come at the cost of anyone's safety. However, eyewitnesses are confirming what I suspected all along. The real catastrophe would have more potentially likely been created by their own security driving badly. Why on earth would you drive up and down the wrong side of the same stretch of road repeatedly if you're trying to escape, which, if eyewitness reports are to be believed, is what they did? Even the mayor of New York seemed to be struggling to believe their version of events.
I would find it hard to believe that there was a 2-hour high-speed chase. That would be, I find it hard to believe, but...
Although, to be fair to the couple, they never actually mentioned the words high speed. That's because it's pretty much impossible in New York. Surely they could have got out of the car and gone into a venue, or perhaps, seeing as they require the press for their financial survival, they could have done what most celebs do and posed for a few pictures. I mean, that would have been the end of it. Instead, after this so-called chase, they got into a fully exposed yellow New York cab.
Did it feel like the paparazzi were being aggressive?
No. They were behind us. I mean, they stayed on top of us. That was pretty much it. There was nothing more, you know. They kept their distance. It's just like journalists, just like everybody else trying to get pictures, make a quick buck.
I mean, the whole thing was a joke. And if we are to draw parallels to what happened to Diana, which it seemed Harry was alluding to in one of the things that he said, then yes, her accident was caused by bad driving that wasn't helped by mainly the French paparazzi, by the way. But her driver was also drunk. I mean, it seems the British press aren't all that bad, are they? And that's not allowed here. Is Harry going to blame the British press, who he hates? They did attempt to put on their litigious hat and demand that Backward, the US picture agency involved in the near-catastrophic car chase, to hand over the images of them when... and this was the response that they met. In America, as I'm sure you know, property belongs to the owner of it. Third parties cannot just demand it to be given to them, as perhaps kings can do. They went on to say, perhaps you should sit down with your client and advise them that it's English rules of royal prerogative to demand that the citizenry hand over their property to the Crown were rejected by this country long ago. We stand by our founding fathers. Well, that's the polite way of putting it. I'm afraid the Americans aren't buying their hogwash either. I'll try again. Citizens, I still can't say it. Well, before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are Labour's policies putting you off? Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has said that he would like to build a stronger trading relationship with the EU if he wins the keys to number 10, and has announced that he would build on the Green Belt and improve the housing crisis. But do these policies sit right with you? Then at 4:50, it's Royal Roundup time, and royal biographer Angela Levin will be in the studio to give us all the latest from behind the palace walls. Prince Harry and Meghan have come under fire after claiming they were involved in a high-speed car chase, although they never used the word high speed. And according to reports, the couple have demanded a celebrity photo agency to share images of the incident. Then at 5, it's this week's difficult conversation. I'll be meeting a man who robbed banks to pay for his wife's IVF treatment. After racking up debts of almost £250,000, Reid Domingo will be joining me to discuss. And that's all coming up in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbnews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. All right, so very briefly, before we do this, really good to see my panellists again. What do you think, Lizzie Cundy, very quickly, your thoughts on Meghan and Harry?
On Meghan and Harry, well, here we go, more for their next flicks, obviously. I mean, I just, can we hit the brakes on this, literally? Because I'm sick of us not getting the truth. We're getting the near truth. They never tell the truth, these two, and it's all for publicity. They're like the Kardashians with coronets, and I've just had enough of it, I really have. I'm sick to death of them, and I'm very sad because no one else is believing this story, even the Mayor of London, who we've just seen, the New York police. Everyone doesn't believe it.
What do you think, Peter?
Well, the Mayor of New York poured cold water on it pretty quickly, and he did so in factual terms, saying there was no collision, no arrests, no damage, no injuries, thankfully. So I think it's clear it was not near catastrophic. But I do understand if you're a prince and your mother has been killed in a road accident in 1997, you know, that's an horrific thing to go through, and that'll stay with you forever. So I can understand why your reaction to that would be very heightened.
But you can't keep going on about it forever, can you?
You can't compare it.
Why wouldn't you? I think that's a bit harsh to use that
I don't
language.
think it's harsh. I think it's...
About the premature loss of your mother?
No, I think you can't continue to make these comparisons like this. You know, at some point, you must try and have some closure within yourself so that you can move forward. And I think that if you continue to... It's like a scab. If you continue to pick this wound, then I don't think there'll be much healing for him. So, in my view, I think, yes, whilst it's very, very sad, he really needs to try and move forward. And this hate is almost eating away at them.
But he has.
And this could have been prevented if they just did a couple of, photos with the packs outside. This would never have happened. And you cannot compare this to Princess Diana's crash one bit.
Right, well, today our top story is, of course, Philip Schofield. He's stepping down from this morning with immediate effect. The 61-year-old joined ITV in 2002. He presented his last show on Thursday and has stepped down after some 20 years. So joining me is TV personality and regular on This Morning, Kim Woodburn. Kim, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, Kim, what's your response to this news?
Well, I think it's not before time. I think he realises his position is untenable. I think he's used common sense at last, and he's gone. It's the right thing to do.
Well, excuse me, Kim, you've been on This Morning, though, and you've...
I have.
What was it like working with him?
Well, to tell you the truth, the confidence he had, you could tell he was king of the road on that show. I mean, he was really ruling the roost. And whenever I've been on with him, he hasn't been very pleasant. And he wasn't pleasant to me regarding my experience in Big Brother. He was downright nasty. And he was literally laughing at me, sniggering at me. And I had the cheek to ask me, what did you earn? And I said, it's none of your business. What did you earn? What do you earn for this show? I said, not your business. I said, precisely, Philip. I said, keep your place. I'm sorry. He's used common sense and gone. The game's up. Everything's out about him. It's all been exposed. He's gone. Now, the only thing I'm praying and hoping now is that young Miss Holly Willoughby gets the common sense to go. Because she's not wanted. She cannot continue. You think of Phil, you think of Holly. And she's, all these years, she's worked with him. She's heard his rudeness in front of people. She's seen him on the sofa upsetting people. I would have appreciated on just one occasion, which has never happened, if she would ever turn around and say to Philip on that sofa, as his co-presenter, Philip, oh, I think you're being a bit naughty. So she could put it nicely. I think you're being a bit naughty, this person. She has never once stood up for somebody who's upsetting. She sat there with a little silly grin on her face, a hand on his shoulder. Oh, Philip, that is not a presenter. She's not a good presenter. And if she thinks she can run that show without Philip, she can't. She needs to go.
Well, obviously, they're not here to defend themselves, but I'm a similar opinion to you. I think they've been on there for too long. They've sat on that sofa gathering dust for many years. It's time to give some other people a chance, Kim. Do you think that perhaps they should have gone sooner, though? Because remember Qgate? I mean, I was expecting them to leave then, but they managed to cling on.
Well, they have clung on for many years. I was very shocked because the Queen of England was held in high regard. Our Queen Elizabeth II, she was a true queen, bless her. And I could not understand for the life of me when they both sneaked in wearing press tags, cutting across the grass, tiptoeing across, and people in queues in wheelchairs that have been there 6 hours. And what Holly was saying, and Phil was saying to the public, is we are very important. We can sneak in, which is precisely what they did. It was rotten. It was rotten to the people that watch them every morning. There was nothing. They were rotten, saying we are Holly and Phil. We can do what we like, and you stand there getting soaked in your wheelchairs. We're far too grand. I'm surprised they didn't go then.
Well, exactly, Kim. You would have thought they did, but as I said, they're not here to defend themselves. But Kim, thank you so much for your thoughts. That's Kim Woodburn.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Look forward to speaking to you soon as well. Well, let's carry on with the story because I'm quite enjoying it. Joining me now is media commentator Nigel Pawley. Nigel, you're not poorly, are you? You're well, aren't you? I couldn't resist. Nigel's not finding that funny. He's heard it before. You've heard it before, haven't you?
I haven't heard that one before. No.
Really? Oh, my God. Some original content from me. Nigel, what do you think about this, and what's your view on this?
Well, I like Kim Woodburn very much. Loved her on the programmes, but I disagree with her, actually. Philip Schofield was going to leave this show. There's no doubt about it. I'm surprised at how quickly he's left, and from his statement, it appears that he was probably prodded rather than he jumped, because he's saying this morning, think it's the story and whatever. So clearly he's been put in an untenable position. He was the story. He says that this morning has become the story. It was him who became the story. Where I disagree with I mean, yes, I've seen the other side of Philip Schofield, and I've seen the other side of television personalities. I mean, you know, they're not what you see on screen. Where I disagree is I think Holly does need to stay with the show. I think she's been in his shadow for too long, and I think she's a very good presenter in her own right, and now can have the chance as a female in her 40s or early 40s to actually shine, possibly with another female, perhaps with Alison Hammond. That's what seems to be the way they're going. And I think they can transform the show and turn it around and soften it. I think they were damned when after, as Kim said, when they jumped the queue. I understand that Holly was very annoyed that they weren't allowed to speak out and defend themselves. They put out a bland statement. I think she wanted to go public with explaining exactly why they appeared to jump the queue.
Yeah, but she made the statement. She put out a statement which was actually, I thought, just added fuel to the fire. I don't think it was a particularly good statement, and what she said was that
I think a statement was put out in her name. I don't know whether that was her statement.
It was her voice. Different. It was her voice, that wasn't it? She voiced it, so you know that's the thing.
Yeah, I know, but sometimes you're told to say things by your manager or PRs.
Well, maybe, but you can't absolve yourself of all responsibility for going along with something.
I'm not absolving her at all. I thought they were appalling. I thought that was the end of them when they did that. People, as Kim has said, had queued for 6 hours, disabled people. It was shocking. All I'm saying is I understand inside the This Morning camp there was some disagreement about how it was handled afterwards and how some of those statements went out.
Well,
and history would say it's probably on my side because she's still with the show and Philip isn't. So, you know,
well, we'll see how long
the tension went on with his brother appearing in court. He was sentenced to 12 years yesterday. And again, she found out when the son phoned her up in the evening about 6 o'clock. Rather than from him. So that's not a close relationship, is it?
Well,
the
but,
relationship's broken.
Well, listen, it's really good to talk to you, Nigel. Nigel Pauly. He's not Pauly, he's well. Thank you very much, Nigel. It's really good to talk to you. This is GB News. Welcome on board. If you just tuned in, we've been discussing all the shenanigans. Philip Schofield has stepped down from ITV. We'll be talking about that throughout the show. If you just tuned in, welcome. I'm Nana Akua. We're live here on GB News. Now, coming up at 5 o'clock, it's this week's difficult conversation. Now, imagine racking up over £250,000 to pay for IVF treatment and then having no alternative but then to turn to a life of crime to pay for that. Reid Domingo will be joining me on the sofa to tell his amazing story in difficult conversations. But coming up next, it's the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, are Labour's policies putting you off? Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has said that he would like to build a stronger trading relationship with the EU, but does this undermine Brexit? What do you think?
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good afternoon, it's 25 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's time now for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, are Labour's policies putting you off? Sir Keir Starmer has announced under a Labour government that he would lower trade barriers with the European Union, making it easier to trade food, medicines and animals, changing the deal that Boris Johnson struck in 2020. Now, this comes as he also said that he would give English councils more powers to build on greenbelt land to boost housing, and sets to give teachers more time off for training under new education plans. These are just some of the significant changes that Labour have promised. The other one was the extra bit on for those private schools. That would be taken off there as well. But what do you think? Do you believe that he's the right person to deliver these? Do you believe that these are good plans to deliver, or is he putting you off? So for the Great British debate this hour, I'm asking, are Labour's policies putting you off? I mean, the more you hear, is it sort of, you're thinking, hang on a minute. Joining me now is senior GB News commentator Nigel Nelson and political commentators Anna McGovern and Matthew Stadlen. All right, I'm going to start with you, Nigel, seeing as you've gone full frame on me. Nigel, you're Labour, or you're somebody who probably supports Labour more. Nigel, what do you think?
I think Keir Starmer's on the right track. He's certainly got more ambitious plans than Tony Blair had in 1997. And it's going to take a while before they're actually firmed up and we get more detail and some flesh on the bones. The National Policy Forum, which is what Labour puts together before the party conference to get policies in place, will be working over the summer. But we've seen direction of travel. There'll be 13,000 more neighbourhood police, 7,000 more doctors, 10,000 more nurses, which all sounds quite a good thing to me.
Yes, but they all come up with these numbers of more of this and more of that. Anna McGovern.
I do not trust him one bit. He's slippery, slimy, and I think that's the best way to describe it. I think that he takes a stance and then in a few weeks' time he changes it again, and we've seen it happen time and time again. Though I do think the Conservatives do need to lose in this election. I think that they need some time to actually go back into the opposition and reevaluate who they actually are as a party, because what we're seeing at the moment is the Conservatives and Labour just pouring out these sound bites into the political sphere rather than actually having any, backing behind it, any foundation behind what they're saying. So I actually think that they do need to lose, though I do not trust Labour to lead this party, the country either.
Matthew Stadlen.
I mean, it is true that Starmer has backtracked on some of his pledges that he made in order to become leader of the Labour Party. Don't forget, he was fighting against, in some cases, the hard left and trying to drag the party back from the brink. I mean, Corbyn took the party almost over the hill, almost to the point of no return. Someone like me who'd voted Labour all my life, I couldn't vote Labour under Jeremy Corbyn. So I think he's done a pretty good job of detoxifying the Labour Party. One of the really interesting areas is this green belt point, and Starmer says he is not going to allow building on the green belt if it destroys or ruins, disrupts our beautiful countryside. We have a beautiful country, Britain, and we want to protect it, but we have a desperate housing crisis. Even the housing minister himself, Michael Gove, says that our housing model is broken. And the Tories have been in power, let's remember, for 13 years. So if Starmer really can build more houses, I think that's a massive vote winner.
Yeah, but they all say that. I mean, Anna McGovern, they always say that, don't they? They're always talking about they're going to build more houses, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. It's all, he's been talking a lot all the time.
Oh, no, absolutely. And this is something that we saw the Conservatives say as well and pretty much fail. I don't think that they've delivered on exactly what they said they would do in terms of building more houses, because we are in a housing crisis in this country, particularly for young people. It's becoming more and more impossible as a young person, if you actually want to buy your own house. If this is something that Labour could actually deliver on, I'd be very impressed. But given how much Keir Starmer's actually backtracked so much, even being in the opposition, let alone in power, I don't know if I buy it.
Nigel Nelson, what do you think? I mean, he has backtracked a lot.
I mean, he made 10 pledges to become leader, and certainly he's not kept all of them. But I mean, when it comes down to the green belt that has obviously caused an awful lot of controversy, what he's actually saying is that it's not about concreting over the whole of Britain. It's about making Greenbelt work better. So, for instance, he gives the example of building a choice between building on a car park, which was designated as Greenbelt, or a playing field, and the playing field eventually got the houses. The problem for any government is that everyone wants more houses, but no one wants the estates built next door to them.
Yeah, well, that can be an issue, but he's making these promises that he's going to actually build on the Greenbelt. I think he's going to get a lot of objection from that. But, Nigel, what about his policy with regard to taking out the tax breaks from independent schools?
Well, I mean, the question there is that I think people should be allowed to spend their money as they wish. However, I don't particularly, as a taxpayer, want to be subsidising their choices. So if somebody wants to send their child to a private school, good luck to them. But I don't think that the taxpayer should subsidise that, and they should pay the full amount. So it seems to make sense to take away the charitable status of private schools and use that money for more teachers in the state sector.
Do you think that works out, Matthew?
I can see the argument on both sides. You don't want the unintended consequences of the education system getting more difficult for more people. The Tories have been busy destroying themselves. Just think back just a few months to Liz Truss's disastrous premiership and the fact that so many people now are paying higher mortgages. So interest rates have gone up, plus inflation. For some families, life is really tough. Nearly 11 million of us are struggling to pay our bills. So Starmer hasn't had to do that much other than detoxify his own party, as I've said. Now we're starting to see a little bit of flesh coming on to some of the bones, because he is going to have to put forward some decent policies himself as we approach the election. You don't want to go too quickly as an opposition leader, because, of course, you don't want the government to steal your policies. Just one important thing, the Tories have really dragged down our police across the country over the last 13 years. They cut 20,000 police. They're bringing back 20,000, but don't forget the population has been going up. So if Starmer can get a grip on crime and make our streets safer, I live not far away. I live round the corner, not far away from here, and the streets do not feel safe. And if he can deliver on that, that's very good news.
Well, he said he would. Anna McGovern, final word to you. You've got about 20 seconds.
Yes, and I think in terms of Keir Starmer, again, as we've all been saying, he changes his mind. I genuinely don't think we can trust him on anything that he has to say.
Well, listen, thank you very much, Matthew Stadler, Nigel Nelson, and also Anna McGovern. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GBNews on TV, online, and on digital radio. After the break, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, are Labour's policies putting you off? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Nana. 32 minutes past 4. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Philip Schofield has announced that he's stepping down from ITV's flagship daytime show this morning with immediate effect. ITV has confirmed that he won't be returning despite 2 decades at the helm, with last Thursday's show being his final appearance. Co-host Holly Willoughby will not be leaving. On social media, Mr. Schofield said he wanted to protect the show that he loved. It's after his brother, Timothy Schofield, was jailed for 12 years after being convicted of child sex offences. World leaders have welcomed Ukraine's president to the G7 summit in Japan.
Good to see you. How are you? Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Bye, guys.
Volodymyr Zelensky met with the UK's Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who said the invite demonstrated the international community's steadfast support for Ukraine against Russian aggression. French President Emmanuel Macron described his presence as a game-changer towards peace. Well, that's as the White House has approved plans to provide F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine and to train its pilots. President Zelensky has repeatedly lobbied Western allies for air support and hailed the move as historic, saying it will greatly enhance Ukraine's army in the sky. The plans are expected to be rolled out in the coming weeks and months, but Russia says it carries colossal risks for the West. The Labour Party claims there's been a big jump in the number of people dying in A&E amid record waiting times. Their analysis of NHS Trust figures show that more than 23,000 people died in emergency departments last year. That's a 22% increase on 2021's figures. The government says it's delivering a record number of tests, speeding up discharges and cutting waiting lists. And a man has scaled the front of the BBC building in central London in protest against a historic statue. He's been seen hammering at the Prospero and Ariel statue, which has been on display since 1933. Police and rescue teams are there trying to negotiate with him. Campaigners have been calling for the statue's removal as its sculptor, Eric Gill, admitted in his diaries that he had sexually abused his daughters. We're on TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn too. This is GB News. Back now to Nana.
Thank you, Ray. Still to come at 5. It's this week's Difficult Conversation. And I'll be meeting a man who robbed banks to pay for his wife's IVF treatment. And after he racked up debts of almost $250,000, Reed Domingo went on a robbing spree. He'll be joining me on the sofa. But before that, it's time for this week's Great British Debate. And I'm asking, are Labour's policies putting you off? Don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. If you just tuned in, where have you been? It's just coming up to 39 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now it's time for our Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, are Labour's policies putting you off? Now, Sir Keir Starmer has announced under a Labour government that the world would lower trade barriers with the European Union. That's within 18 months of getting the keys to number 10. Critics argue that this would undermine Brexit, and that is as Starmer is set to give English councils more powers to build on green belts and to boost housing. So what do you think for the Great British Debate this hour? I'm asking, are Labour's policies putting you off? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, also former editor of The Labour List, Peter Edwards. Lizzie, I'm going to start with you. Labour's policies, first they want to kind of get closer to Europe again, which sounds to me like they kind of want to do a slight backtrack on Brexit.
Yeah, policies, what policies? That's reversing out of Brexit isn't a policy, is it? And it goes against what the majority of the working class voted for in their drones. And I'm sorry, king of the flip-flops, yet again, backtracks, and what are his policies, in fact? Because there's no, the devil is in the detail. He gives none. He's very good at this. He says all what he thinks everyone wants to hear and win votes, but he doesn't give any proper detail. I mean, talking about the green belts, he's saying we'll build where appropriate. What does that actually mean? How is he going to do it? Tell us something, rather than just trying to do these, grab, these banners to grab votes.
Peter.
Labour are not going to take Britain back into Europe. Keir Starmer, as leader, has ruled out returning to the customs union, returning to the single market and return of freedom of movement. They've all been ruled out. He's also said no to a second referendum. So there's a lot of mythology springing up that you often get in the 12 to 18 months before a general election, sometimes fuelled by newspapers like the Daily Mail. It is a nonsense to suggest Labour is going to take Britain back into the EU. Let me tell you one other thing. It is right and perfectly sensible to have good relationships with neighbouring countries. One thing recently has underlined that, and that's the small boats crisis, where 2 years ago, Yvette Cooper was saying we need to work with France. Then Rishi Sunak finally came around to that point of view. It is completely sensible to get on with your neighbours. And there was someone called Boris Johnson who in 2016, a week after the referendum, said we should have closer ties with Europe.
But there's nothing wrong with having a good relationship with people who are your neighbouring countries. Nobody's saying that. That's not what Brexit meant. Brexit didn't mean that you dislike your neighbours. It simply meant that your neighbours could no longer come straight.
What's your point?
We want
Sorry,
freedom.
don't hang on. I'm speaking. Don't ask me what my point is when I'm trying to make my point. And it's my... Am I going to do the My Show thing again with you? This time, Peter, I'll just push you off your chair, but it'll be on camera, so I'll have to do it carefully. No, listen, I'll get to my point, and I'm making... The point I'm actually making with regard to this is that nobody disagrees with the notion of being friends with your neighbours and so on and so forth. So that's not even anything that anyone is disputing. And you're kind of saying it as though it's, Boris Johnson said that. So what? Everybody expects you to get on with your neighbours, but the point is that what are they going to do about the small boats coming across the channel? Well, I want to hear their policies. I want to hear some policies.
Keir Starmer didn't have that in his 5-point
No, let Peter answer that, because he thought he would try and take my job again.
So, no, I do consider myself told off, so we'll bank that. But there's a suggestion, I think, perhaps from you, that Keir Starmer has an underhand or an unspoken intention to take Britain back into the EU. And I'm saying that's not the case. I think we then agree that it's good to have close relationships with your international allies. That's in the small boats crisis, so Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, said closer ties with France. That is now happening. She said spend more on getting through the immigration backlog, because that's one of the pressures where people are in Britain in very unsafe processing sites like Manston. And Labour's also proposed setting up a new cross-border force where you join together police, a border force, a Home Office, and work with international partners, because what everyone feels about the causes of the migrant crisis is putting lives at risk.
Well, we agree with that.
Do you think he's a good leader? Do you think Keir Starmer
is
a good leader? Do you think he has well worked out policies? Do you trust him? My answer is no. And I rest my case. I mean, he thinks he's the, ultimate authority on anything, and he doesn't even know what a woman is. This man cannot be our next leader.
May I respond to that? Yeah.
Well, I think you should, yes.
Yeah, so I'm not sure you can say I rest my case after answering your own question. So, first of all, he's had a life outside politics, which I think is really important. And when he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service, the conviction rate for sexual offences increased. So he's putting more bad guys behind bars. I think that's a good thing. Also, he's accepted the result of the e-referendum, which is another thing perhaps some more sceptical broadcasters or newspaper editors have challenged him on. And he's articulated a clear plan on the migrants crisis, and he's also acted with integrity. So, for example, when people in the Labour Party have made inappropriate comments, they've been suspended. So I absolutely believe he's the right person.
Well, no, he still doesn't know what a woman is, though, does he?
You say
adult human female.
Yeah, but no, that's you saying it. He
question.
hasn't said that. Listen, and he struggled with it, and it's embarrassingly bad. But on your point with regard to Sir Keir Starmer, he seems to be dithering a lot, though, when it comes to decisions. And he has flip-flopped a lot. And if he's going to take the reins as leader of this country, we need to know that there's somebody who's got some sort of backbone. And so far, the fact that he's not been able to talk about what a woman is and is trying to deflect on that and move on to other things and call them culture wars, which, for me as a woman, it's very important. I want him to address that, and he hasn't.
I think that's a fair point of challenge. He needs to be able to give a clear answer on transgender issues, and it's right that I think he has looked nervous at times answering that question. I think that's born out of sensitivity rather than anything.
No, he's trying to keep sides with everyone. He sits on the fence so much he'll get splinters. He will not say what he really feels because he's scared of offending, and he's using the trans community as some political football to win and score points. And that's
why-
true.
why- so
He
why do you
can't
say
answer
political
the fact. He can't even answer the question. He was asked so many times what a woman is. Sorry, that's just so embarrassing.
But you use the phrase political football. I have to challenge that. Why is him being asked by journalists, why does that amount to a political football?
Because he won't answer the question, which he knows. He's a married man, got 2 kids. I'm sure his wife is a bit worried that he doesn't know what a woman is. Surely.
But that's not what a political football is. I think your analysis just doesn't make sense. He's not, in every broadcast interview, and I should imagine he does several dozen, if not hundreds, over the course of a month, he's not bringing up transgender issues. It's just inaccurate to say he's using a trans community as a political football.
Well, why doesn't he answer what a woman is then? Because he surely knows and he won't answer it.
Well, I think he's got to a place now where he obviously has been hesitant, there's no point denying that, where he'd just say
He can't.
an adult
Well, it's
is a female.
embarrassing.
It's embarrassing. I don't know why he's done it. But see, this is the worry for a lot of people, that if you're going to be so difficult, it's going to be so difficult for you to answer simple questions. And there was a time when lots of politicians kept doing that, and they're still doing it. They're always doing it. It's very annoying. So for me, watching, I want a decent leader. Now, the Tory party are eating themselves in the inside out. I don't know what they're going to do, frankly. I don't know whether I support them or not. But as for the Labour Party, I'm very sceptical about being able to support them. And I would have considered it had he been more firm with his reply as to what a woman is, had he not flip-flopped about policies, had he not addressed things that the British public are really serious about, like the culture wars, which he dismissed, which are very, very important, especially when it's in schools. And I don't understand why he does not relate to the British people, I think, and that's a problem for him.
Yeah, I mean, this label, culture wars, covers so many different areas, but I think it's a real challenge for the Labour Party, because the Labour Party, out of good intentions and political sense, wants to talk about the things that do matter and come up when I go out campaigning. So NHS, GP waiting times, crime, and so on and so on. But I think Labour has generally, in my lifetime, been slightly ahead of other parties in being anti-discrimination, particularly in the 1980s, where local authorities run by Labour were doing a lot more in terms of equal pay for women, black rights, standing up for the gay community. So having been a leader in the past, Labour needs a clear and crisp answer on some of the culture wars issues. But I generally believe the election is going to be decided on the usual things: economy, GP, crime, NHS, and a bit of Brexit as well.
But he's not real Labour, is he? There's a cigarette paper between Labour and Conservative. Because he's got more or less the same views as Rishi on many of things, but he won't.
Can you name one?
There are many. He's
one.
like on the immigration, for instance, about what he's going to do. He's got the same as Rishi.
No, he hasn't.
Yes, he does. But he didn't bring that into his 5-point plan, did he? He didn't even talk about the real issues people wanted to hear about. He didn't discuss, and he won't discuss or answer the questions. I don't actually know how he won any case as a barrister, because he never answers a question, and his questioning skills are useless. For me, I don't trust him. I'm sorry.
Every party can have their own priorities, but it's just inaccurate to say he's the same as Rishi Sunak on migration. The Tories have said they want a cap, and Labour have said a cap cannot be delivered. They're not the same. They are different.
Well, they're two very livable parties, I'm afraid to say.
I've just explained why they have a different policy.
This is why people are in the political wilderness, because Labour aren't being true Labour, and Conservatives aren't being true
he may
Blue.
well flip-flop as well if it's not popular, but this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Let's go over to Bristol, shall we? Should we chat to Lee?
I like
Lee's always got something interesting to say. Lee Harris, what do you think of the Labour Party? Oh, I don't know. What's your view?
Oh, my God. Keir Starmer's Labour Party puts me off altogether, Nana. It's not just slippery Starmer's vague, light on detail, utterly boring 5 missions. It's the Labour Party's entire culture and what they stand for. You know, I really do fear for this country being run by a Britain-hating, woke Ramona coalition from hell. And sadly, that's what we might be heading for.
Yeah.
You know, Labour are no longer the party of the working class. They're the party of woke Remainer elites who care more about identity politics than they do about women's rights and the working class. Yeah, I believe that Keir Starmer has policies as well that are specifically designed to take us back into the EU through the back door. He's already laying the groundwork by pledging to renegotiate the Brexit deal, as you've been discussing, which we all know means closer alignment. He wants to give 16-year-olds the vote and EU nationals the vote without the need of being a UK citizen. You know, as we know, these groups are much more likely to be left-wing and oppose Brexit. He's doing this because he doesn't want us to take advantage of Brexit. He just doesn't believe in the UK's ability to govern itself, and I don't trust the man in the slightest. Just one last point, I'll be really quick. It's also worth making this point that we're probably heading for a hung parliament. irrespective of what he says now, there's a high chance he'll need to do a deal with the Lib Dems or the SNP, which could be on the basis that they reverse Brexit or possibly bringing in PR. So we'll be stuck with awful, indecisive, woke left-wing coalitions forever. Anything he says now, Nana, is utterly worthless.
Thank you very much, Lee Harris. Very succinct as ever. That's Lee Harris. He's our great British voice. What do you think? You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it's Royal Roundup time, and royal biographer Angela Levin will be live in the studio. According to reports, Buckingham Palace haven't reached out to Prince Harry and Meghan after their so-called near-catastrophic car chase in New York. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Now, there's always something going on in the royal household, and this week has been no different. According to reports, Buckingham Palace haven't reached out to Prince Harry and Meghan after their so-called near-catastrophic car chase in New York. And this comes as May the 19th marked the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's 5th wedding anniversary, with friends praising the fortitude that they've shown during the last few years. And that's as King Charles is set to visit Romania in June without Queen Camilla. So every Saturday I like to give you a rundown, and who better to do so than royal biographer Angela Levin.
Hello.
Angela Levin. We do it again, we're like in the right opposing colours, blue and yellow.
No, we don't talk about it at all, it just happens. Just happens.
So Angela, this car chase, the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah, it's very interesting. As you said, it's their 5th wedding anniversary. I had the good luck to be one of the rare presenters of that wedding, and it was so happy. People were so happy for them. The sun shone, and we thought she was going to be wonderful. And it's just really sad what you see. Look at Harry now, 5 years on, and he looks absolutely shriveled. And I think, I really mean it seriously, actually.
All right, I won't
The thing about him is if he has got a big fixation about photographers, and one can understand that because of what happened to his mother, then he shouldn't have gone to the party. He shouldn't have gone. He should have... Camilla. So Meghan should have looked after him and said, look, if you don't want to come, we're bound to have paparazzi around us.
Yeah, but,
leave it.
No, but they use the paparazzi all the time. I mean, on their grounds, they use the paparazzi whenever they like. So...
Yeah, but they plan it so they get them to come over. They didn't expect them to come and stand round the car.
But they went round the back, didn't they? So
they went round the
back.
back.
Just done the posing, and then the press.
The whole thing is ridiculous. They didn't wear seatbelts. So if you're so worried about his mother and the lack of wearing a seatbelt, they should have worn it. It's legal. They must do that. None of them wore a seatbelt. And if you looked at the three of them in the car, Meghan's mother looked exhausted and nearly asleep. Meghan looked fine. She was smiling and everything. And Harry looked absolutely terrified. And the nonsense of going into a yellow cab where you don't have any privacy.
Well, there's no blacked out windows.
There's no black window.
Right through.
People could, yeah.
What is this about?
It was, well, I think it's about two things. One is that he wanted the Home Office in the UK to see how dangerous things are and to encourage them to protect him, not just in the UK, but also around the world. I mean, that is a silly idea because if he's not working as a royal, why should we pay for actually 4 people? That's 6 people a day. It's a nonsense. I think, in a way, he hoped it would prove that he does need it, which is why he upped the sort of thermometer about it all and made it much, much worse.
But you know, if reports are to be believed, some people who saw things said that it was his security driving badly. I mean, they were obviously driving... So, you know, they were driving badly by the sounds of it. So if they're driving badly, causing a situation, OK, they may have been surrounded by press and things, but that doesn't give them the right to drive badly.
No. I mean, it was obviously them who weren't driving badly. We have to work out why. I mean, some people have said to me, well, that's because they're very careless in New York. They don't take it so seriously as the UK. Some said, well, they were asked to do that to create a scene so they could make a drama. You know, who knows? We weren't there. But I was astonished that one of the protection officers, the only one in the taxi, got out to see what was going and left them. I mean, how can you do that? It's impossible.
But this is New York that has some major celebrities living there. Mariah Carey, you know, you often hear of Kim Kardashian and people like that in New York. New York is an incredible place. I've been there. You cannot really drive fast.
No.
Although they didn't use the words high speed, but obviously it's been said and they've not come out and the whole gaslighting thing appears to be happening. They haven't said, no, we didn't go high speed. And if you've ever watched the film Zoolander, where they do this thing and they go really fast in between the traffic lights, they have a car chase. It's about 100 yards. And that would have been the long and short of that car chase.
4 miles an hour, you know, that because it gets so jammed. Well, they must have known that. Meghan must have known that. She's been back and forth to New York so many times. I mean, what they could have done is to ask to get certain roads blocked so they could go through. But they obviously didn't want that. And the fact that they were going around for 2 hours to hide where they were going is absolute nonsense when it was 20 minutes away. So, I mean, it's a disaster, and they have looked so foolish that everybody's making fun of them.
What about, let's move on to King Charles and his trip to Romania. He's going without Camilla.
He's going without Camilla. He loves Romania. He's got a house there that he's now had furnished. He likes to refurnish places. I think you can think, oh, gosh, what's happened? You know, they've only just got the crown and are there arguments. I'm sure that's absolutely not true. Camilla would be delighted to have a bit of peace. She can spend it with her children and her grandchildren. And he actually, when there's a drama, like after his mother died and things like that, he needs a lot of solidarity. And he needs to be on his own and to walk and to think and to just recover from it all. But the sad side is that Was it too much for both of them in their mid-70s?
Maybe. Well, the Queen kept going on for as long as she did, so
But
I'm
not
sure...
all the back drama.
Well, yeah, it is difficult, isn't it? But listen, stay tuned. Thank you very much, Angela Levin. Always a pleasure talking to you. That's Angela Levin. She's royal biographer. Right, this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. More to come in the next hour. So good afternoon, it's just gone 5 o'clock. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. On the way at 5, I'll be joined by a former bank robber who turned to a life of crime to fund his wife's IVF treatment. And then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should childcare come out of our taxes? But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. Coming up to 1 minute past 5, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Philip Schofield has announced that he's stepping down from ITV's flagship daytime show this morning with immediate effect. ITV has confirmed that he won't be returning despite 2 decades at the helm, with last Thursday's show being his final appearance. Co-host Holly Willoughby will, however, not be leaving. Mr. Schofield posted on social media saying he wanted to protect the show he loved. It's after his brother, Timothy Schofield, was jailed for 12 years after being convicted of child sex offences. World leaders have welcomed Ukraine's president to the G7 summit in Japan.
Good to see you. How are you? Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Bye, guys.
Volodymyr Zelensky met with the UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who said the invite demonstrated the international community's steadfast support for Ukraine against Russian aggression. French President Emmanuel Macron described his presence as a game-changer towards peace. Well, it's as the White House has approved plans to provide F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine and to train its pilots. President Zelensky has repeatedly lobbied Western allies for air support and hailed the move as historic, saying it will greatly enhance Ukraine's army in the sky. The plans are expected to be rolled out in the coming weeks and months, but Russia says it carries colossal risks for the West. Well, meanwhile, the head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group is claiming full control of the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. It's been the focus of the longest and bloodiest battle of the war. Ukraine's Deputy Defence Minister says the situation is critical, but denies that the city has fallen. The leader of the group, which the UK plans to declare as a terrorist organisation, said its forces will withdraw next week for rest and retraining. The Labour Party claims there's been a big jump in the number of people dying in A&E amid record waiting times. Their analysis of NHS trust figures show that more than 23,000 people died in emergency departments last year. That's a 22% increase on 2021's figures. The government says it's delivering a record number of tests, speeding up discharges and cutting waiting lists. Counting continues in the local elections in Northern Ireland, with just 40 seats now left to declare. Sinn Féin has made strong gains and is on course to become the largest party in local government, with 133 councillors so far. The DUP currently has 115 and the Alliance Party 59. It's the first electoral test for the parties since last year's Assembly elections and takes place against the backdrop of the Stormont stalemate. Our Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie says the political landscape in the country is changing.
The DUP's vote is down about 1.2%, and the UUP, which is the very Liberal Unionist Party, is down at around 3.2%, and the TUV is up at about 1.5%. So that means that Liberal Unionism is going. They are becoming, the moderate side of unionists are becoming much sterner, and they are turning away from the Good Friday Agreement. This is a massive blow for anybody that wants to get Stormont up and running again, because Chris Harris was always about threatening unionists that he would go to another election.
A man has scaled the front of the BBC building in central London in protest against a historic statue. The man has been seen hammering at the Prospero and Ariel statue, which has been on display since 1933. Police and rescue teams are there negotiating with him. Campaigners have been calling for its removal as the sculptor, Eric Gill, admitted in his diaries that he had sexually abused his daughters. And police have seized 15 dogs and arrested 2 people after a fatal dog attack in Greater Manchester. 37-year-old Jonathan Hogg was killed in Lee on Thursday. 24-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of being in charge of a dangerously out-of-control dog causing death. And a 22-year-old woman has also been arrested on suspicion of money laundering. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. So let's get straight back to Nana.
Hello, good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. Now, this show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, also former editor of The Labellist Peter Edwards. Still to come, Philip Schofield has announced he's stepping down from ITV's flagship morning show this morning with immediate effect. ITV has also confirmed that he won't be returning despite 2 decades at the helm. With last Thursday's show being his last, co-host Holly Willoughby will not be leaving. Then on the way, it's this week's difficult conversation. I'll be meeting a man who robbed banks in the US to pay for his wife's IVF treatment. After racking up debts of almost £250,000, now he's fighting to be allowed back into the country following his imprisonment and subsequent deportation to the UK. And for the Great British debate this hour, I'm asking, should childcare costs come out of our taxes? Tory MP Miriam Cates claims that young people failing to have babies is the biggest threat to Western civilization. But recent research by Working Families shows that almost half of working parents are being pushed into debt by childcare costs. So should it actually come out of our taxes? Email me your thoughts as ever, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. Right now, we've been hearing this afternoon, TV presenter Philip Schofield has announced that he'll step down from ITV's this morning with immediate effect. In a statement, Philip Schofield said this: "Throughout my career in TV, including the very difficult last few days, I've always done my best to be honourable and kind. I understand that ITV have decided the current situation can't go on." Meanwhile, Philip Schofield, now former co-host Holly Willoughby, said, "It's been over 13 years, great years, presenting This Morning with Phil. And I want to take this opportunity to thank him for all of his knowledge, his experience and his humour. The sofa won't feel the same without him." Well, let's have a chat with Katie Banks. She's a showbiz journalist. Katie, thank you very much for joining me. Right, I suppose the question is, what does Philip Schofield do now?
Well, I think everyone will be asking the same question because he's been such a mainstream presenter for so long. And I think ITV have already announced that he'll be doing another show for them. So we'll have to wait to see which one that is. And then also maybe he might go down the reality route now because he's lost a bit of popularity during these rumours of a feud. So maybe he would do a big show like I'm a Celeb or something like that to show people his softer side and maybe get back some of the fans.
I can't believe it that you're saying that they're going to give him another show. What on earth?
It's not over for Phil, Nana. It's not over.
It's clearly not over for us as well. We have to endure him for longer, for goodness sake. I mean, look, he's been on that sofa. He's been almost 2 decades. Can't ITV find some new blood, new talent? It's over. Why don't they just... I mean, I just don't get it.
I think ITV will be now on the hunt for new talent to join Holly. At the moment, the names being thrown around are Joel Dommett, Dermot O'Leary, and then whether she gets a female co-host. So Alison Hammond is a hot favourite to take over. And then with Phil, they've been saying that he's one of the most influential broadcasters of his generation. So I think it'll be a long time since... till we see the end of Phil, because he's still got a lot of fans out there. And I think he said, "I'll see you at the Soap Awards," and he'll be desperate to get another mainstream show now.
I find it incredible that they're saying he's one of the most influential. He's one of the most long-standing. But I think that there comes a point when I don't think the young people are interested. You know, we're all sick of it. He did the queue jumping, which didn't do much for his popularity. I mean, to be frank, I would have expected him to have gone then, but he didn't.
No, I think that he was absolutely desperate to hold on to his This Morning position because it's such a fantastic job in the industry. And people were saying even in the last few days that he didn't want to leave This Morning and he really wanted to stay on the sofa with Holly. So what's been going on behind the scenes, I'm not sure. But he has decided that he wants to leave the show. And I think his PR team will be going into overdrive now just to prepare something massive they'll be going into next.
Oh, God, well, you know, thank you so much for that. It's really good to talk to you. I mean, frankly, I've had enough of him. He's been on TV for ages. Listen, I don't mind, but I don't understand why TV are still going to give him another show. It just sounds... there's so many other great presenters out there. Listen, thank you so much. It's really good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Well, if you just joined me, welcome. It's just coming up to 11 minutes after 5 o'clock, and it's now time for Difficult Conversations. Now, we're going to meet a man who robbed banks to pay for his wife's IVF treatment after racking up debts of almost £250,000. Now, he was born and raised in the UK. Reed Domingo. He turned to crime after he and his wife, Patrice, spent more than $250,000 after 9 rounds of IVF treatment. Now, the couple who met in San Diego when Reed moved to the US to work for his father's firm liquidated their assets and remortgaged their house before Reed turned to robbing to help pay off his debts during his crime spree, avoiding telling his wife the truth as she was poorly following several bouts of treatment. Now, although they were happy, and there is a happy ending to the story, I won't tell you the ending. I'm pleased to say that Reed joins me now. So let's talk about the full story, Reed. I don't want to ruin the ending.
Thank you, Nana. Yeah, I don't want to give it away either yet, because it's... so, yeah, what would you like to know? I mean...
Well, talk to me about it then. So, you met your wife in America. You went to work for your father's firm. Was your father still alive? What was...
No, unfortunately, my father passed about coming on to 5 years ago. But he was the cause of me going out there. I was working for his biochemical company. I had a really good job. Everything was great. I met Patrice. She was going through a divorce at the time. She'd had 3 children previously. We fell in love and decided to get married. And obviously, after getting married, can we have children? And obviously, the unfortunate thing for us was after her 3rd delivery, she had her tubes cut.
Oh, no.
So we had to obviously circumvent that issue. And as such, we're both healthy young individuals. They anticipated 1 round, you guys should have a win.
So how old was Patrice at the time?
At the time when we started the procedure, I believe she was 33.
OK, that's quite young, isn't it?
Yes, relatively young, but then basically we tried over 5 years and we had 8 failed attempts. I think the big issue for us with regards to the United States is it's not covered by insurance.
Right.
They considered it to be experimental in 1992, and also it's elective. If you want it, you pay for it. So even though it was around $15,000 per cycle, you know, we had the money, we did it, we were unsuccessful, we tried again and tried again. We went through 8 failed attempts before finally getting it a success. On our 9th, we had a little angel baby whom we called Angelique.
Angelique, how cute, how cute. But how did you fund this then? Because I mean, it sounds like you went all about the houses to get the money. If it's $15,000...
Yes.
Every time?
Every time.
And 8 times 15,000, what's that?
Oh, it's about 150, I suppose, something like that.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose, obviously we did all the usual things. You know, we tried to get a second mortgage on the house. We did rack up about $60,000 in credit card debt. And I think what kind of precipitated everything for me was that, you know, as I said, I worked there for my father. Unfortunately, my father and I had a bit of a tenuous relationship, and right after Angelique was born, I borrowed some money from my dad. I didn't pay him back, and he told me basically, don't ever call me again. That might sound a bit harsh, but that was my dad.
So then you lost the relationship with your father. He sounds like he was fairly wealthy if you had a company.
Yes.
And you were working for him and you're doing quite well out of that. So then you started getting £15,000. At what point did you start trying to rob banks to...
Okay, so basically we know how to have success, but the damage was done. As I said, I was probably a good couple of $100,000 in debt now. And I was working for a bank at the time.
Right.
And as a consequence, even though I wasn't customer-facing, I had to go through all the bank training, one of which was, what do you do in the event of a bank robbery? didn't think about it at that time, but it was basically, you know, a couple of years into it, I wrote all the checks for the household bills. And as I said, I think I might have mentioned previously, after Patrice gave birth to our little girl, she became incredibly ill, to the point that she barely could even get out of bed. As a consequence, I said, look, I'll take over all of the responsibilities of the household and, you know, paying the bills, all of that sort of stuff. You don't need to worry about that. Just focus on yourself and our little girl. And that was probably the reason why she had no idea the actual financial situation that we were in.
So how did you go about robbing the banks? Did you go in a balaclava? Or was it some other sort of more sort of under the radar way?
No, unfortunately, it was sort of old school in the sense that I went in and I robbed the bank.
They would have gone, hey, there's Reed, he works around the corner. That's
I understand, but I robbed one of our competitors. And I'm not trying to be flippant about it. And first and foremost, I'm not condoning it. And in no way am I trying to glorify the bank robberies. I was in a desperate situation and under a severe, both financial and emotional pressures. You know, my wife was incredibly ill, and we didn't know what was wrong with her at that time.
But obviously, like, to rob a bank is a desperate move, and obviously you're not promoting that, and I respect the fact that you said that. But what in your head thought that I'm just going to go in and rob a bank? And, like, what, you literally went in there, just old-school style, and robbed a bank?
I think the thing, through the training that I had, I was made aware of exactly what was expected of the teller in that situation. And I knew, as I'd been taught, that I didn't need to have a weapon. I didn't need to threaten anybody. I didn't need to do anything to traumatize the teller. All I had to communicate was that I would like the money. Simple as. As you can tell, I have a very distinct British accent. So when I went into the bank, I handed the teller basically a printed note that, in essence, basically said, stay calm, everything's fine, I would like the money. And because I communicated that, every single teller knew exactly what to do. They basically put the money in front of me, I took the money, put it into a bag, I left. My total involvement with the teller was probably less than 30 seconds. But I knew exactly what the teller was going to do, and as such, I knew I didn't need to do anything to threaten or scare the teller into doing what I wanted.
But then you got caught. How did you get caught?
Ultimately, when everything was said and done, I realised this was a dead-end road. I got a new job. I more than doubled my salary. We were ready to move on. I hadn't robbed a bank now in 9 months, and I was robbing a bank every single month previously.
So you're actually doing this and getting away with it?
Yes.
Wow.
I robbed 12 banks in total. And after I'd robbed these 12 banks, the FBI was after me, and they'd given me a moniker called the Motorcycle Bandit, because I used to carry a motorcycle helmet and wear gloves when I went into the bank. But when I left the bank, I would get into my car or my truck, and there were several bank robberies where I was leaving the bank and I saw the police coming, lights flashing, sirens blaring, drove straight past each other because they were looking for a motorcycle. Basically, I got this new job, and the FBI basically sent the best picture they had of me to every single bank in San Diego and LA County, and it was a teller at my personal bank that I'd been banking at for 15 years, exactly as you said, Nana.
I knew it.
She looked at it and she said, oh my gosh, that's funny, it looks like Reed. And everybody laughed because, as you can see, I'm a fairly personal individual, British accent, but she said, oh, la la, and they all went back to work laughing. There was a new supervisor at the bank, and she was the one that called the FBI, and what did the FBI say? What's his name? And that's what started it. And as a consequence, because the FBI had my name, they were able to subpoena all of my bank records. I had about 6 accounts spread over 3 banks, and they were able to see a bank robbery and then like deposit in these various accounts. Then everything's quiet.
So they got
bank robbery.
But then surely, so they don't want you back in the States now. Did you serve time in America?
Yes, I did.
So then you came to the UK.
I was deported. At the end of my sentence, I served my full sentence.
You were deported.
I was deported. Plus, I think it is important to state that when this all went down, I pled guilty. I didn't try to game the system.
But you had to be caught, though. That's the thing.
Well, yeah, obviously.
You didn't put yourself. But then so why should they let you back in? I mean, why would they?
Because my wife still lives in America, and so does my child. Angelique, I haven't seen my daughter now in 6 years. She was here fulfilling her secondary school education and completed all of that, then went to the United States to fulfill her career, which she's intending to go into law enforcement in the United States. And one of the interesting things I must say, actually, Nana, we never told our daughter what happened. So when I disappeared at 4 years, when she was 4 years of age and I went to prison, we told our daughter that I was working on a ship. And every so often, obviously, the ship comes back into port and all of the daddies get to see
And what about the money that you robbed, the amount? Did you have to pay that back?
There is some restitution that I still owe the United States government. And obviously, yeah, I will pay that back. But it wasn't a lot of money because I robbed the banks by myself.
So now, very briefly, because we're running out of time,
sure.
What are you up to now?
So basically, this is the whole reason that I'm doing something right now is I'm trying to right the injustice that US government has now dealt me. They basically told me, if you can show us 15 years of clean criminal conduct, we'll let you come back in. I showed them 17 years and they still said no. And that's absolutely counter to their top line, which states that clearly. If you can show 15 years, we'll let you come back. So this is what I'm trying to do right now. And I'm trying to get the ear of an American politician, probably a Republican, because Patrice is a registered Republican, to look into this and right this injustice, because I did everything that the US government asked of me.
Well, yeah, Reed, listen, it's really good to talk to you. I hope you get what you want, because actually you've done the crime, you've paid the price, and you've done the time afterwards as well. So it would be nice to let you back in, but obviously we don't condone back in.
No, absolutely not.
You don't either. So.
Can I want to say one last thing? There's a podcast out called Time with Mr. Reed that basically tells this whole story. And up to that point, there's going to be some more seasons, but if people could tune into Time with Mr. Reed, Apple, Spotify, etc., they will get a lot more information.
Interesting. Reed Dominguez, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Nana.
OK, right. Well, stay tuned, because on the way is the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should childcare costs come out of our taxes? Tory MP Miriam Cates claims that young people are failing to have babies, which could be the biggest threat to Western civilization. But recent research by Working Families shows that almost half of working parents are being pushed into debt by childcare costs. So should it come out of our taxes? We'll discuss that next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians her task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua and it's time now for the Great British Debate. So, what do you think? I'm asking, should childcare come out of our taxes? Now, earlier this week, Tory MP Miriam Cates told the National Conservative Conference that young people failing to have babies is the biggest threat to Western civilization. Another MP, Speaker Danny Kruger, said that the reluctance to have kids was due to the selfish me generation. But some women have claimed that it's about the money. And recent research for working families shows that almost half of working parents have been pushed into debt by childcare costs. And at the moment, they can get some free childcare for very young children, but it's not as comprehensive as schooling. And according to the Family Childcare Trust, it costs more than £14,000 a year. That's right, to keep children under the age of 2 in nursery. And that's as the average cost of raising a child has risen to roughly £200,000. And all of this comes after Boris Johnson has announced that he's expecting his 8th child. I think it's 8th. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should childcare costs come out of our taxes? Right, well, I'm joined now by Belinda de Lucy. She's a former Brexit Party MEP and political commentator. Rebecca Reid, author and broadcaster. I'm going to start with you, Belinda. You've got 5 kids. 5. Oh, my God. How did you pay for all of them?
4, just 4.
Is it 4? I've added an extra. That'll be your husband, though.
Yeah, exactly. He's definitely a child, yes.
How did you manage to pay for that? I mean, did you... What happened with you?
Well, I'm a very old-fashioned girl, and I knew when I had children I would be a stay-at-home mum and live within my means and compromise on things so that I could stay at home and look after the 2 little ones. But when I had my 3rd child, I was able to have some help with the children. So I do feel very lucky in that. But I'm very old-fashioned in the sense that I think the less the state interferes in rearing our children, the better and the healthier for society, especially as the educational sector nowadays is heavily politicised and children are being exposed to all sorts of harmful ideologies that they shouldn't be. And the more time children stay at home with their mothers, if they can afford to, the better. However, I recognise that nowadays the cost of living is so high that women are being forced into work. And the old community, it takes a village to raise a child culture that I grew up in the 80s is no longer really prevalent. Families move away from each other, so you can't go and spend, time with your auntie while your mum went to work. So we do need to address it. And the birth rate is too low in this country. And as long as it keeps falling, the more the government will justify massive immigration to fill the family decline here, and that's not healthy for the society either. So we do need to encourage people to have more children, which may mean the taxpayer has to dip into their pocket a bit and help with childcare costs for those who can't afford it.
Interesting. There is a single mum, though. That's what you said there. It's a lot harder if you're a single mum. Rebecca Reid.
Much harder.
Yeah, I'm a single mum. So my situation is that I have astronomical childcare costs, and I'm not planning to have another child. I could do alone. I might meet somebody else, but realistically, having seen how financially crippling it is, I adore my daughter more than anything else in this world, but I can't afford to have another one. And I am a middle-class, well-paid woman, and the kind of person who the Tories would like to have children. I am white and British and the right kind of woman, and I'm not going to have more babies. And all of my nice girl friends are the same, because there is a certain quality of life you want to give your child where, and I'm not talking about private education or having a Range Rover, I'm talking about not being worried and being able to occasionally say, yes, you can have a magazine at the shop, and maybe being able to go on holiday once a year. That standard of living that was fairly typical in my 90s childhood now feels aspirational, and like I would have to compromise on that to be able to have more than one child. That's an extraordinary state of affairs. No wonder people aren't having babies. I think the irony, though, is that Danny Kruger called it selfish and the me generation, people not having children. It's inherent. The most selfish thing you can do is have a child. It's creating an avatar of yourself. It's fundamentally a selfish act. The reason my friends aren't having children is because they're not selfish. They don't feel like they can give the right life to a child, and therefore are choosing not to have kids.
What about what Belinda said about state intervention, though? She said the less the state intervene, it's a good thing. But as a single parent, you need as much help as you can get. I mean, what would you say to her on that?
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I mean, I am also very into as little intervention from the state as humanly possible, apart from when they're giving me money. I don't want that money to come with stress. I don't want to have to go to, I don't want my children to have to be in a state nursery where I have no choice where they go. I would like this. The current system is that you get to choose the nursery your child goes to, and you get a certain number of free hours, but you still get to shop around for where you want them to go. What I wouldn't love is a system where if you are on a lower income or you need the help, you then have to put your child in a specific nursery, because then you don't. And that's sort of how it works with schools, right? You know, we saw what's her name, Burble saying the other day, take your kids out of woke schools, as if everybody has multiple schools they can put their child in. And I don't want that situation. I think it's really important that parents have a right to put their children in the school that they feel is right for them. Often it'll be a school that I think is dreadful. I would never put my child in some of the schools that people think are brilliant, but it's a parent's right to choose.
Belinda, what do you think then of an idea that the money for nurseries would actually come out of taxes? So just like a school, people could send their kids to that, and that would be in your taxes, which would avoid the problems that Rebecca's talking about, which are the astronomical costs would put people off of having another child.
So the problem I have, I suppose, again, it's very old-fashioned, is that what the government is saying is that the only value women have in society is an economic one, and therefore we just need to get as many out into work as possible. And I think that is devaluing motherhood and the role women play in rearing young ones and toddlers before they go to school, and the massive impact that can have on the early years. And so I wish that there were more tax breaks for mothers, so they could at least have the choice of staying at home and rearing their children. I also think childcare costs in the UK are so crazy high compared to other countries, because we have far too strict regulation on the child carer to child ratio, and we have 5 million Brits that were paying not to work rather than mobilising them to help with staff shortages in the public sector that can reduce costs. We're again importing a workforce, which is increasing the housing crisis, which is then reducing couples' determination to have more children because they can't afford a house.
Can I
It's
give
this
the
horrible
last
circle.
Finally, Rebecca, we've got about 20 seconds. Over to you. Last word to you.
Reducing childcare ratios just makes nurseries shut down, unfortunately, and it makes them less safe. So there has to be a better solution. And I think we're both coming at this from same place, different angles. We all know this is a problem. We all know it needs solving.
Well, listen, Rebecca,
But do you think the taxpayer, though, should fork out for other people's children all the time, or parents should have a bit more responsibility?
You think they should? Yeah.
Yes, I think they should, because you want more babies, you're going to have to pay for more babies. That is the rule.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Rebecca Reid, and also to Belinda de Lucy. Right, so what do you think then? This is GBNews on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm asking, do you think that the taxpayer should fork out for your kids to take them to nursery? I'm Nana Akua. We've got loads more to come. We'll be discussing that in the Great British Debate. So should childcare come out of our taxes? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and economist Lizzie Cundy, also former editor of The Labour List, Peter Edwards. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
33 minutes past 5, I'm Ray Addison. Philip Schofield has announced that he's stepping down from ITV's flagship daytime show this morning with immediate effect. ITV has confirmed that he won't be returning despite 2 decades at the helm, with last Thursday's episode being his final appearance. Co-host Holly Willoughby will not be leaving. She's responded saying the sofa won't feel the same without him. On social media, Mr. Schofield said he wanted to protect the show that he loved. It comes after his brother, Timothy Schofield, was jailed for 12 years after being convicted of child sex offences. Well, world leaders have welcomed Ukraine's president to the G7 summit in Japan.
Good to see you. How are you? Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Bye, guys.
Volodymyr Zelensky met with the UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who said the invite demonstrated the international community's steadfast support for Ukraine against Russian aggression. French President Emmanuel Macron described his presence as a game changer towards peace. Well, it's as the White House approved plans to provide F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine and to train its pilots. President Zelensky has repeatedly lobbied Western allies for air support and hailed the move as historic, saying it will greatly enhance Ukraine's army in the sky. The plans are expected to be rolled out in the coming weeks, but Russia says it carries colossal risks for the West. Counting is continuing in the local elections in Northern Ireland, with just 40 seats left to declare. Sinn Féin is on course to become the largest party in local government, with 133 councillors so far. The DUP currently has 115 and the Alliance Party 59. It's the first electoral test for the parties since last year's Assembly elections. And the Labour Party claims there's been a big jump in the number of people dying in A&E amid record waiting times. Their analysis of NHS Trust figures show that more than 23,000 people died in emergency departments last year. That's a 22% increase on 2021's figures. The government says it's delivering a record number of tests, speeding up discharges and cutting waiting lists. We're on TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn too. This is GB News. Nana will be back in just a moment.
Thank you, Ray. Still to come, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has claimed that Britain no longer judges people by how much money they have in their bank. As the public has moved beyond that, we're discussing that and we'll be going through our Great British debate after the break.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News. the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, where have you been? Near the end of the show now, but it's fine. You've got 20 minutes left. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's time now for our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, should childcare costs come out of our taxes? So what do you think? Let's see. So joining me earlier this week, Tory MP Miriam Cates told the National Conservative Conference that young people choosing not to have babies is the biggest threat to mankind or to the Western civilization. Recent research also shows that almost half of working parents are being pushed into debt by childcare costs. I know all about that. It was a nightmare. As a single mum, God, it cost me a fortune. I've only managed to get out of that pit. But I know there's a lot of single mothers struggling with that. And at the moment, working parents can get some free childcare for very young children, but it's not as comprehensive as schooling. According to the Family Childcare Trust, it costs more than £14,000 a year to keep children under the age of 2 in nursery. And that's as the average cost of raising a child has risen to around about £200,000. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should childcare costs come out of our taxes? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by the lovely Lizzie Cundy and also Peter Edwards.
Not lovely.
No, he's not so lovely. No, Peter, I'm going to start with you. Are you a single dad? Have you got children? What's your predicament, can you say?
Yeah, I won't get into details, but I'm a parent. I'm a parent, and my son's 6, so obviously he's kind of past the stage of childcare, but one can easily pay over £2,000 where I live in East London for full-time childcare, and I have friends who are both working and have 2 children, so if they want to carry on working full-time, they can pay £4,000 to £5,000 a month, which is extraordinary.
It's unbelievable. Are you a single dad, or are you?
Well, I'm not going to talk about my family situation.
No, I just wondered because as I'm a single mum, so I'm just wondering if that makes whether that predicament will make things different for you. That's all.
Well, it's too high relative to incomes, and I'm sure that's the case in other parts of the country where childcare might be less, but in relative terms, salaries are less as well. I think, let's zoom out from me and you to the political. Both main parties have wrestled with kind of what are the right policies on childcare and paying for it. And I think Jeremy Hunt at times has said things a bit more progressive, which is essentially the Labour view that childcare is part of infrastructure. When we talk about infrastructure, we don't just talk about roads and cars and the tough-sounding stuff, but childcare, because it supports people going to work, and people going to work, of course, generates tax to pay for stuff.
Lizzie, what do you think?
Well, look, the government has spent £4 billion a year for the last 5 years helping families with the cost of childcare, but it frankly isn't enough. And as you said, Nana, birth rates is plummeting. This is a real worry, and we've really got to encourage women to get back into the workplace. It's good for the economy. It's good for them. It's gives you a focus as well as being a mother, and it's really, really very, very difficult to have be able to afford to have a child. And like you said in your wonderful column, Nana, you say, oh wow, huge congratulations on being pregnant. Now it's like, wow. You've got a big financial worry that is, bringing bringing a child into this world, it is so expensive.
It really is. I mean, like, my experience, obviously, I'm a single mum. My first child I had when I was, I can't remember, 37. The next one I had when I was, 46. And luckily, see, I waited a bit till I was a bit older, so that I had a little bit of money, because I thought to myself, I can see how it goes when you're very young, and it's very difficult to do that. And, you know, even me, who had some money and worked really hard and things, I found it extremely difficult in terms of finance as a single parent. What you could get, because there are elements where I was above a certain threshold, but that didn't make that. But that meant I wouldn't get that benefit, but I got a bit of this and a bit. It was a nightmare. It really was.
That's a really key point, and I found that, and without getting into all the minutiae, but it's what tax experts call a cliff edge, where if you earn nothing, you get a modest level of government support for childcare. If you earn a certain amount, you get a slug that was introduced, I think, by David Cameron, a slug of money, depending whether there's one or two parent in work. But then it tapers off when you earn above 100 grand. I mean, people that earn above 100 grand, they're in a different territory, so they wouldn't be top of my list of people to worry about. But all of these incentives, and I think many of us between us, we've probably lived through the various government schemes. Despite all of them, unless you are earning 100k, which most people don't, it's still very, very difficult to pay for two children, especially if they're, say, 2 and 4 or 4 and 6, and they're not able to look after themselves, and pay a mortgage.
Yeah. I mean, most young people can't even get onto the housing ladder, can they? Let alone think about having a family. I mean, my son is now 27, and he's thankfully just got on the housing market. But to think of a family on top of that, and that's the problem we have.
Well, they come out as well of university with up to £70,000, if not more, of student debt, which people say, oh, that's not a big debt and everything, but it is a headache and a burden that you will carry, even though you know that you're going to pay little bits of it off and it's chipping away. It's still a psychological thing there that you're in debt, and that doesn't help. So I think young people are thinking with that in their mind, and then the fact that it's difficult to get on the property ladder, you've got to get a massive deposit as well if you want a house, and then even if you do manage that, then the huge cost of childcare is extortionate. Do you think that perhaps there should be a system that's more like the school system, where it's kind of within the taxes and you can just chip in if you... Maybe you could... it could be that you pay a certain extra premium so that when you have kids or something like that. Do you think there should be something there?
Well, if you mean by the primary school system, so essentially universal state provision that's free at the point of use, paid for out of general taxation, well, we'd all love that. And I'm sure Labour would love to promise that. But I don't think any party has worked out yet how one can afford that. Remember, the biggest childcare funding change of the last decade was when David Cameron introduced the 15 free hours a week, 30 free hours a week if both parents are in work. But of course, if you're working full-time, you don't work 30 hours a week, you work 35, 37, 40. And I'd criticise David Cameron for an awful lot of things, including that, but at least it was something to incentivise work for parents.
It needs to be more realistic.
We should have fully funded.
I think it should be. I think it should be part of it.
But how do you pay for it?
Well, we'll work that out later. I mean, they managed to find 37 billion.
But if Labour says that, it'd be how much work that out later.
Well, listen, no, they managed to find 37 billion for track and trace, which no one could trace where the money went.
Exactly.
But this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome some of our great British voices. Their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics they're discussing. Today I've got 3 of you now. Wow. OK, I'll start with you, Seshni. Do you think childcare should just literally come out of general taxation?
Good afternoon, Nana. Yes, I do. I agree with your panel and also what you were saying. It is really costly to have children in childcare. I had 3 children, 3 under 5 at one stage, and that was like almost my whole salary. So it was actually better for me, not to be working. But people can't afford that these days. And that's obviously deterring them from actually having kids. And I think what they're saying in the government, that it's all about me, Danny Kruger, I think that's incorrect. I think it's more because it's so costly.
It's so expensive. Miranda Richardson from Northamptonshire. Not the Miranda Richardson, it's Miranda Richardson from Northamptonshire. Miranda, what do you think?
Good afternoon, Anna. I do think it should be covered as well. I think it's that horrible rock and a hard place, because we're losing some brilliant minds and some brilliant people out of their job roles who have families, start families, choose to have families, aren't making that high-end level money, and then can't go back into those roles because they can't afford the childcare. And then we're losing that wealth of knowledge in the jobs they're doing because they can't afford to come back. So it's a massive issue that we lose such wealth of experience. We're down on numbers in production of children, but reproduction, obviously.
It's like a production line.
And because we can't do it, I absolutely think we need, like you say, we need to get that money, and we'll find it from somewhere.
Brian Dugan, there you are in Edinburgh. You're in Edinburgh this time.
I'm in Solihull.
Why do they keep changing it? Solihull. All right, Brian, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I agree. I mean, you have unanimity on the panel here. I agree with Miranda and Sesni and what you were saying in the studio. I think we do need to look at the system, and there's a problem, and we need to find a solution to make it work. Because we can't be in a situation where, you know, you talked about your own situation, and that's just wrong. That shouldn't be the case. You know, you're earning good money because you're working in a good job, and you should be able to provide for your children, as opposed to having that kind of nagging fear at the end of it all that I'm not really going to be able to afford things, or I've got to pick out here and pick out there. So I think I would go with something in terms of perhaps a premium, and I think we do need to find some solution to this.
We do. Thank you very much, Brian, Sesni, and also Miranda. Lovely to talk to you. There's our great British voices. Right, let's move on to another story that caught my eye. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has claimed that Britain no longer judges people on how much money they have in the bank. Sunak said, "I talked a lot about that last summer. I think that we've moved beyond judging people by what's in their bank account." He wishes. "I think they're interested in whether I'm going to deliver for their families." So do you agree? Lizzie, do you agree?
I do actually agree. Look, I know people say he's like, you know, how can he know what we're all going through with this high cost of living, him being a billionaire? But a person's wealth hasn't anything to do with their values and what they can do and how they can help others. And, I mean, I know Starmer has done loads of hits on Rishi, but, you know, he's got own personal wealth of 7.7 million.
Himself.
And he earns a year, I think, 160k. And, I mean, that's, you know, he's hardly on the breadline, is he?
Peter?
Well, I would question that figure about Keir Starmer. I think in terms of our values, we're all a product of where we come from, whether that's school, family, the job we hold,
What about the money?
the neighbourhood we live in.
On money, though?
Generally, no. And my advice to the Labour Party is that attacks on Rishi Sunak for being wealthy are doomed to failure, and the public won't like it either, because the public likes aspiration. When I worked for the Labour Party briefly, in the Ed Miliband era, a lot of attacks on David Cameron for being wealth, and he won the next election with a larger vote.
Shabby Labour got to stop these cheap shots.
Well, yeah, and actually, to be honest, although, you know, the only thing that I would say with regard to all that wealth is that if you're going to, like, a place where there's lots of working-class people who don't have much money, don't go in Prada shoes. That's all I would say. But actually, I quite like the fact that he is wealthy, because then he won't be sort of... There's none of that kind of worried about money type thing and doing deals with people.
With all that money, his suits still don't fit, though, do they? Those trousers.
Well, you see, that's it. That's another thing. But right now, it's time for our quick-fire quiz as part of the show where I test my panel on some of the other topics that are in the headlines right now. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie, press your buzzer. And former editor of The Labelist, Peter Edwards. Your buzzer, please, Peter.
Why have I got a blue buzzer?
Because you're a boy. Press it.
A red lefty.
It's a gender stereotype. Right, let's... brilliant. Question 1. Please play along at home. Who topped the Sunday Times rich list? Was it A, Sir James Dyson and family, B, David and Simon Rubin, you've got to let me finish, and family, or C, Gopi Hinduja and his family? Press the buzzer if you want to go. Lizzie Cundy.
I'm actually going for B.
Is it B? You think it's David and Simon Rubin and family. What do you think, Simon?
C, Hindujas.
Hindujas, let's see if you're right. It's the Gopi Hindujas and his family. You're totally wrong. It's Gopi Hinduja. They're the richest family, richest people in the UK. They're worth about £35 billion. That's according to the Sunday Times Rich List 2023. The Hinduja family, who were behind the Indian conglomerate Hinduja Group, have topped the list for the second year in a row as their fortune jumped by more than £6 billion.
6 billion.
Question 2. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his wife Carrie had announced that they're expecting their third child. But how many children does Boris Johnson have? Closest answer wins. Press the buzzer. Lizzie Cundy.
I don't actually think Boris knows.
Well, I was going to say, he probably doesn't.
8.
Your turn. Where's your buzzer?
I think we're being a bit mean.
Where's your buzzer?
I don't know the answer. We're being a bit mean to Boris and all his other children.
Yeah, it says you. 7, apparently. It's 7.
Very close.
7. Yes, you win because he didn't say anything. He's got 4 children with his ex, Marina, 2 with Carrie, and 1 from an extramarital affair, Helen McIntyre. Right, let's see, question 3. Andy Rook, who died at age 59, was the bassist in which 1980s rock band? Was it A, The Cure, B, The Smiths, or C, The Clash? Peter?
I think it's the Smiths. Andy Rourke.
It is, in fact, the Smiths. You're absolutely right. He died of pancreatic cancer, terrible cancer, that right. Question 4, true or false? David Beckham gave the King home-produced honey at the British Fashion Week this week. True or false? Lizzie?
True.
Let's see if you're right. It is,
false.
in fact, true. No, it's true. That's true. And finally, last question. A driver in Colorado was pulled over for speeding, but what unusual thing did he do to avoid arrest? Was it A, he tried to put his dog in the driver's seat, B, he pretended he was blind, or C, he tried to hide in his boot? Liz?
Well, I don't know the answer, but I would love that he put his car, the dog in front. Is that right, mate? I think that would be hilarious.
Know, but there's an old joke about dogs in the car seat, so I hope it's that one.
The dog in the car seat. Let's see if you're right. It is. He tried to put his dog in the driver's seat. That is absolutely correct.
I can't believe it.
Was Lizzie Cundy. To avoid arrest, he attempted to switch places with his pet. Well, on today's show, we've been asking, are Labour's policies putting you off? According to our Twitter poll, 87% of you said yes, only 13% of you said no. What I've got to say, a huge thank you to my fabulous panel. Lizzie Cundy, thank you very much, Lizzie.
Thank you, Nana.
And also Peter Edwards, thank you very much, Peter, for joining us today. Lovely to see you. And as ever, a huge thank you to you at home for your company. Well, stay tuned. I'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. with former Brexit MEP Martin Daubney, political commentator Andy Williams, and we'll be going head-to-head. And from 4 to 6, Danny Kelly and also Claire Pearsall. I'll see you tomorrow at 3.
Hello there, welcome to your GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. I'm Craig Snell. We're having a look at Sunday, bit of a north-south split, risk of some rain across Northern Ireland and Scotland, but elsewhere should be dry and fine. The area of rain is all courtesy of this weather front, which will gradually work its way towards Northern Ireland and Scotland during the next 24 hours or so. But further south, high pressure remains in charge, so here it's going to be a fine second half to the weekend. So going into the rest of Saturday, you can see largely clear skies across a good chunk of England and Wales. But further north, we see this area of rain could turn quite heavy in places, especially across the Scottish mountains. But no problems really here with temperatures. But further south under the clear skies, it could turn quite chilly for the time of year, especially across some prone spots of the Midlands and Wales. But that will set us up for another fine day across many parts of England and Wales. A little bit of cloud from time to time, especially across eastern coasts. But generally, the cloudy skies will be reserved for Northern Ireland and Scotland. The rain will weaken as the day goes on, so hopefully by the end of the afternoon we could start to see some sunshine developing for northern parts of Scotland and maybe also Northern Ireland. But the best of the sunshine will be further south, where we will see highs reaching 21 or 22 degrees. Into the evening, the rain will continue to weaken. Still will leave behind some cloud across Northern Ireland and Scotland. Further south, this is where we'll see the clearest of the sky. So once again, we could turn quite chilly, especially across parts of Wales and into the Midlands. But overall, as we start Monday morning, we start on a fairly quiet note across the country. We still hang on to some cloud across eastern Scotland, but it will improve here as the day goes on, and generally the best of the sunshine will be further south and west you are. And as we go into Tuesday and Wednesday, very little changes across the country. Largely dry and sunny for a lot of the UK, and in the sunshine it will feel pleasantly warm for the time of year.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9,